everybody. I'm Thomas Fusser, your host, and welcome to another exciting episode of UAP Disclosure Tonight. For once, I'm a letter for Clem, and I'll kind of share and let you guys know what kind of happened. If anyone hasn't heard, where is this ad video? No, come on. Logos. Yeah. My mom passed away this morning, so it's been a tough day, and it's something she was really proud of this show and really proud of me going ahead and being a part of UFOs and all the different kinds of stuff that go on. So the last thing I couldn't do is to say, Mom, we love you. Enjoy the place where you're at. We're all jealous. And for that matter, we'll see you soon. Well, hopefully not that soon. On that note, let's take this back and get back and say hi to the crowd. We're just waiting for our guest to come in. He's got a little bit of a problem getting here, but we'll get there in a second. First of all, I want to say hi to everyone in the chat room. Let's do this the right way. Show the chat. Go to the beginning. Ack. Hey, great to have you here, man. Bob Gray, wouldn't be the same without you. Hopefully those trees and that wood's holding up for you. Ethereal Aura, thanks for being here, man. Greatly appreciate it. Great Troll Man, always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming in today. Who else do we have? I know Julie Wenchel is here. Welchel. Sorry, Julie, just kind of happened. I'm known for those kind of things. Gregory O'Brien, well, you're here and you're back in the chat. Who else do we have? Looks like that's about everybody. Yeah, I want to see now. Is it Rican Havoc that I see? Yeah, Rican Havoc. Welcome, Rican. Glad to have you here, man. On that note, we've said hey to everybody. And let's go ahead and bring up... Hold on a second here. Bring out my friend Rob. Hey, Ted, how you doing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Rob, why don't you say hi to the audience? I'll tell you what.
How's everybody doing?
We can figure that out in a second, but rather than that, the camera can be there, but we can also get your voice on and stuff. If you can call me back, I can pipe you through.
Kind of running a little bit behind right now, trying to get everything coordinated. It's been a little bit of a chaotic day so far for a few of us, especially Thomas. So
we can, but it's not showing up. I'm not sure exactly why it's not showing up, but we'll figure out what's up with the whole thing and just try and
get it rolling. Really looking forward to this the last couple of days now, at least. Got my questions printed out. Looking forward to the conversation. It's going to be fascinating.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
So, yeah, there's a background with initiating the what the FAA should be doing, but isn't, with having a program where civilian pilots can report sightings and encouraged to, and appropriate responses when they do encounter these craft and things. You know what to expect, and you know what countermeasures typically in place, and basically sharing information. You know, the FAA should have had standard, but they don't. So that's where people like Ted come in.
Yeah, Ted's been going and doing this. He's been working with Dr. Haynes for about, was working with him when he was a part of it, but it's been 22 years since they founded NARCAP, which is an amazing organization. It's the National Aeronautic Reporting Center for Anomalous Phenomena. In other words, UFOs, UAPs. That's some really cool stuff he's got going on. And in the meantime, let me go ahead and just pop something up that's pretty freaking cool here. Dave Beatty went and showed this on his website. Let me go ahead and go over to it. There we go. Aliens are real. Now, that could have been added by someone afterwards, but just the thought of the military going and potentially having something like that up on their tanks, well, they're sharing our love. Granted, they might get their ass in trouble for having that up there, and it may be taken down, but you never know where it's at. And on this note, when we're just talking, looking at that, and then Dave had some other things up on his. Let me make sure I've got streaming mic so I can get.
Think about the sky in the middle of the desert. Think about how the opportunities these gentlemen out in the middle of nowhere have the basically virtuous endless skies. And they imagine, and I have heard stories, of course, out in Afghanistan to where they've heard airplanes flying over without any lights on. And next thing they know, they are looking through the night vision. And then all of a sudden there's the loop-de-loop coming in, that they only can see with the night vision.
Yep, I hear you. It's just part of the whole piece. So at least the military is going and kind of showing off something like that to an extent and kind of seeing where we're at. Okay, I think I've got Ted set up so when he eventually does call, I can click the button and he should be able to hear.
They're saying my mic volume's a little loud, so I'll turn my voice down if that's still a problem.
No, it could be my audio is probably not too late, but
I think I hear it coming through Rob's.
I can turn it down now.
Yeah. Oh, the bleed through, yeah.
Okay, is that better again?
Yeah. Oh.
How about now?
Nice.
Okay, I think we're good now.
Yeah, it destroyed my mic. So right before we hooked things up, so
yeah,
kind of short notice for grabbing another one.
Can't do that. Damn, Twitter doesn't make the video larger. I'd like to. Let's try zooming in. There we go. This is a video from Twitter. It's a time lapse that's going over. Look at that. That came up in their time lapse. Can you see that one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
he's going into time lapse is just moving. This is July 2021 in Azuma, Bahamas. And you can see that the stars are slowly moving. There's meteors and things kind of going and flying by. Then as they're getting to one particular point. There we go. Hey, Ted. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Just
cool. You should. Let me make sure I got audio to Rob. That's it. Bose audio. I think we should be good. Thanks for showing up, Ted. Yeah, mistakes happen with audio. Stuff happens. It's technology. It's never quite the easiest, does it, my friend?
Yeah, that's the truth. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Give me a second here. I just have to go to here, and I have to take the audio output here. It's got you blaring coming through the speaker, my projector right now. I just need to make sure that's kind of toned down a bit. But that's okay. We're getting there. So yeah, yeah. Let me give me 1 second here. Just go behind here, the green curtain. Pay no attention to the man behind the green curtain.
Your mic seems a little down, Thomas.
My mic is a little down. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right, Ted, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Excellent.
Cool. Yours is just blasting. I need to figure out where that is. Let me get 1 second. That's just, I want to have an echo going here. Oh, it's one of those days where it's video, it's Bose audio is going to there, system preferences. Oh, I know what I can do. I can go to FaceTime, which is my streaming mic, my loopback, which is going to there, and I've got FaceTime, and I can turn you down right here. Okay, Ted, now we've got it set. Now there shouldn't be any echo and stuff. Let me get the audience back to where we deserve to be.
All right.
It's been a hectic day. I'm sure you understand.
I do understand, sir.
Yeah. Let me go back to this one here. All right, cool. We got it. And what I should probably do is just for everyone else who isn't going to be around, I've got tonight UAP disclosure, and I've got this piece of text I'm going to say on the phone. Where's it at? Row. There we go. Now everyone knows that you're talking. Okay, let's go ahead and, as they call it, reset the room. Welcome to UAP Disclosure tonight. I'm Thomas Fessler. Along with me, I have my number one man, Robert Heatherly. Thanks for being here, Rob. It's always a pleasure having you around. It's life is never easy and getting things, and the better you have times with your friends and your family, whether they're here along with us in the stream or they're over in the chat room. We greatly appreciate everyone coming out tonight. And also along with me is Greg O'Brien. He's off to the far right, but I'm blocking his name with a logo, so let me fix that. So is Greg O'Brien. He has his own channel titled as well, Greg O'Brien. He's also into UFOs and everything, and it's also great to have you here. But more importantly, we have Ted Rowe on the phone. Ted has been involved with an organization called NARCAP, which is the National Aviation Reporting Center for Anomalous Phenomena. And he's been in that organization for 22 years that he founded with Dr. Richard Haynes many years ago. He's been involved in, some close-up events with, the phenomena. Maybe a little bit too close for comfort, but it's amazing stories beyond that. And he's, they've been involved with so many different aspects of the phenomena. He's truly an amazing person. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I would say aloha, but I'm in Alaska right now, so I would say otchet, which is hello from our Inuit friend.
Nice.
Excellent.
Well, it's definitely great to have you here. I know, and when I was on another show in the past, we had brought you in over there and had you in a conversation. And I think most of the people who I have over here weren't part of that. So it's just, it'd be great to hear, how did you, and, if you want to get into the story and kind of fill us in, how, your life kind of brought us all down the trail like it did with me and others to where we are to now and dealing with ufology.
Well, I'll couch it in the recent developments here with the AIAA. When I first started looking into UFOs, they were something that happened to me, and I wanted to understand them. And I was in 8th grade. I went to the public library, or not the public library, but the library at West Junior High in Great Falls, Montana. This was 1972 or 73, and looked up UFO. And the first thing in the card catalog was the AIAA statement on UFOs and their UFO subcommittee sample case. So I looked into that and I thought, gee, that would be interesting. And then years later, when Dr. Haynes and I founded NARCAP in 1999, again, I felt the AIAA was a very important component in all of this and was unable to get their attention. And then about 3 weeks ago, the AIAA called me, said they were putting together a technical presentation on unidentified aerial phenomena and invited me to present our findings from NARCAP around aviation safety implications. So it's a very important moment. It's probably the most important moment ufology has had since they closed Project Blue Book. The title of the session is literally advocating for research into unidentified aerial phenomena.
Right. And just to recap for everyone, AIAA stands for the
American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics.
Right.
They are the premier professional organization for U.S. aviation, and they drive most innovation and research in the world. Very important organization.
Yeah. So basically, if you're a part of the aviation or astronautic industry, you're basically already a partner within this organization.
That's exactly right. And you're probably working on ideas and concepts that are formulated and fostered by the AIAA.
Absolutely. And the event that you're kind of talking about there's one that's coming up on, I believe, in August 6th or so, going the August 2nd through 6th.
Yes, it's the AV21 conference. It's a technical conference. There's just on August 6th alone, there'll be 41 sessions, and ours is only one of them. It'll be 3.5 hours long.
Wow. That's amazing. So it's, can we share the details of who the panelists are on screen, or do you want to keep that quiet? Or
no, absolutely. Feel free. I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead if I can open this with preview here.
Feel free to read the whole thing because it's pretty impressive.
So let's go ahead and just do that right now. So this is the advocating for scientific study of unidentified aerial phenomena, technical perspective with focus on aviation safety. And this is going to be in Delaware. A series of technical presentations and panel discussions to inform the aerospace community and to advocate for conducting technically professional studies that predict the objects identified as unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. The discussion will focus on the technical characteristics of UAP and its implications on flight safety based on unclassified videos, radar observations, and firsthand pilot encounters. So it's great to hear they're actually going to be going ahead and actually, taking that into effect, Ted, where they're actually going to be listening to what the pilots have said. And because there's so many people right now who are just, looking at what's out there and they're saying, well, I don't have enough evidence. I don't have enough evidence. But if you have good, credible reporting from pilots, and a lot of times that's more than enough.
The sad part of it is that the FAA doesn't take pilot reports, so the FAA can't even sit in on the panel. They have no data.
Wow.
And so, it was interesting. We'll let you read everybody's name there in a second, but I just wanted to share with your audience. I was working with the moderators. We had a little huddle. All of the speakers got together with the moderators and the organizers, and we were talking about our presentations, and they were offering critiques because they're inside the AIAA, so we were getting their internal perspective on things. And one of the fellows said, Mr. Rowe, I strongly suggest that you mention the recipients of your work. And I was dumbfounded. I just sat there for a minute. I didn't really know what to say. The recipients of my work, I've been working underground for 20 years, trying to get the AIAA and the FAA and all of the other acronyms out there that are aviation related to look at this stuff, and they won't do it, and the FAA won't even take the reports. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, we've been an underground organization for all these years. This is the first time anybody's taken us seriously.
Right.
And I mean, it's not really true. We've been taken seriously in other contexts,
Right.
but this is where science and aviation is first getting a chance to actually look at this with a open mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's
I
an
did notice-
important point that you educated us on when I was at the other channel and you talked about that. And then when I had seen and I've looked it up and I've seen it within their guidelines and their books, and saying we don't take this if this is something that went on, report it to these other public agencies or to like your local police. So it's kind of like, really, the approach towards it was just disheartening.
And it's been going for 20 years,
Right.
and excuse me. Forbes magazine put out an article about 3 weeks ago on and the title of it was along the lines of the FAA doesn't track commercial pilot sightings of UFOs. Here's who does. And they listed Newfork and they listed NARCAP, and they took one of the quotes off of one of my activist commentaries and said that the FAA, quote, provides zero leadership or guidance on the subject of UFOs to pilots or the aviation system. So they have no data. They've got nothing.
Yeah.
So
if there are cows that we saw getting abducted, it's like Rob was saying, flying cows only get reported during tornadoes. Otherwise, we don't want to hear for it.
And propane and Tic Tacs. We do see those in the Ozarks occasionally, along with flying semi trucks, but they're only during tornadoes. But they have been sighted.
I usually see Tic Tacs in the truck stop. But anyway, please talk a little bit about my co-presenters.
Yeah, okay. The panelists include Ravi Kapaparapu. Hopefully I got that right, Ravi. He's a planetary scientist from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, focusing on the science of UAP, past and present. Next is Kevin Nuth. He's a PhD as well, associate professor of physics, University of Albany, New York, editor-in-chief of the Entropy Journal. He'll be focusing on the flight characteristics and physics of UAP. Peter Reale, who's a board director on Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, will be talking on the anomalous aerodynamic physics demonstrated by the 2004 Nimitz UAP encounter. Next, we've got a former U.S. Navy pilot, Ryan Graves, who flew an F-18F, is a principal investigator within R&D and defense industry. So he's doing an investigation of R&D. Not sure exactly where, but he'll be, talking on eyewitness account and the persistent detection of non-participating aircraft by USN tactical aircraft in 2014 to present. On top of that, we've got Ted Rowe, who we've got on the call right now, who is the director of research from the Naval Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, also known as NARCAP, talking on UAP and civilization, 20 years of research and advocacy. And then the last person who will be in it is Philip Ilaries.
Ilaries,
yeah, who is a project controller from the European Space Agency, also known as the ESA. He is a board member of UFO Data, which is mitigating flights for mitigating flight safety hazards. Actually, his story is going to be on UFO Data, mitigating flight safety hazards towards better detection and characterization of UAP. The presentation is undertaken as personal work and not as research activity by the ESA. So we've got someone from there not talking on behalf of it, but they're, still covering it to a degree. Wow, that sounds like an amazing thing to be a part of, Ted.
It's really a huge lineup. Yeah, it's terribly intimidating, I have to say. It's probably the most rarefied crowd I've ever been with. They briefed us and told us there would be technical people, engineers, scientists, military folks, and what else was it? Politicians that several of the senators are either going to be dialing in or their staff will be. So we're getting some attention with this. This is a very important moment, and it's kind of a watershed moment for ufology too. I don't think they realize it, but once this wheel starts rolling, an awful lot of amateur science is going to go by the wayside because these guys are ready to step in and do the real work. There seems to be a high degree of interest in the topic within the aviation community and the research community and the science community right now. So we'll just see how it goes, but it's our attempt to kickstart science. And this has been everybody's complaint. Well, why won't science engage this? Well, there's some very definite roadblocks, including the FAA. In my presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about all of that. I'm going to talk about our 20 years of research and how it revealed 100 years of pilot incidents and observations, and how they have trends in the data, both in aviation safety factors and in appearances and in flight characteristics, all of which seem to indicate that they're very different from anything else that we see.
I mean, you've mentioned before You've mentioned before that you have reports going back like 100 years, and the same basic 5 crafts that were initially reported way back when are the same types that are being reported today.
Yes, it's there's consistent trends in the data in the appearance. The first report I have is a newspaper clipping from 1916, and it involved a pilot who was accosted by a half a dozen of what he called flying manhole covers. Disc forms. And then in 1924, I have a DH-4 male pilot who was flying over Nevada and claimed to have been forced to land after encountering a huge wingless cylinder. And David Hastings was flying over Nevada and took a picture of one in 1985, and plenty of people have been seeing cylinders all along. So there's a trend in the data. The discs are a trend in the data. Spheres or spherical objects, or mostly spheres and ovoid shapes, I guess, is another common report. And then the most common of all are balls of light. And I don't know whether those balls of light in every instance are masking an object, or whether they're an energetic form of some kind,
Yeah.
a plasma.
Yeah. Didn't you go ahead and one time we observe a craft coming out of a base somewhere that was actually in orbit, had something in it? Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, sure. This kind of goes towards the hotspot idea. Right now, the conversation is limited to watching them fly by and trying to figure out what they are. The next step is to understand that there are places where these things recur, that they happen on a regular basis, although we don't necessarily know what the frequency of that is.
Yeah.
And I don't think that my science audience is ready for that conversation, but for those that are listening, we all understand that hotspots are part of the genre. That we look at hotspots, we look at aviation cases, we look at ground observations, we look at abductions, right? And that's kind of the primary thrust of the interest in ufology, is in those directions. So I've been told that there was a UFO hotspot near where I live in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. You have to understand that Kona and South Kona are a lot like Sedona, Arizona. There are a lot of people there with a lot of spiritual energy, not so much rational energy. So trying to take people seriously when they spend more time on the spiritual side than the logical, rational side is challenging. And it's a tightrope I've had to walk most of my life. But I've been told by a number of people at Kealakekua Bay, where Captain Cook was killed and dismembered, that UFOs were seen coming out of the water and hovering over the cliff and then proceeding up the mountain and disappearing over the neighborhood next to Choice Mart up on the mountain, a place called Keopuka Heights. Mm-hmm. And so I'd heard these stories repeatedly, and I got to be friends with the priestess that keeps the great temple there. Her family had been watching it for a long time, and she's a Hawaiian priestess. She trained on Nihau, and very intelligent woman, had a degree in law and a degree in psychology. And it had a spiritual mission she was working out called Project Aloha. Aka was her name, Haleaka Iolani Puli. And Aka came to me one day and she said she had learned that I was into UFOs. And she said, "Brother, the UFOs, they come out of the water right over there, and they hover over the Pali and collect the mana, and then they disappear in the Keopuka up by Choice Mart." So here I was getting a kind of a quasi-official thing. This is folklore, right? This is anecdotal information, and it's where good science can start. It starts with somebody telling you they saw something and you being curious enough to going and looking. And so I was there one night. I spent many, many hours there. I teach free diving, breath hold diving, and I do swimming tours, and I tour people around Kealakekua Bay and get them in with the dolphins and whatever else is swimming around out there. And so I was skeptical, but I was there. And then the middle of the night, one night of thousands of hours that I've been there, I'm looking out to sea, and sure enough, out of the water comes a red ball or an orange ball of light. Mm-hmm. A couple of seemed to be out in the mouth of the bay, so it was a mile or so away, and it proceeded to rise up and approach the beach. And as it was coming, I realized it was a very defined orange globe, very soft in color. It wasn't bright, it wasn't radiating, but it was a globe with definite edges and terminus on it. And inside of it was a flying saucer that fit inside of the thing. It was a ceramic looking thing. It looked, it was white, had a 3 bumps on the bottom of it arranged around a center point. And then it had a line about a foot or so inside from the edge on the underside that went completely around the device, sort of a rim. Couldn't see the cupola on it because the way the edge was wide enough that I couldn't see the top of the thing as it was coming. It passed within 100 feet of me to my right over the beach. It wasn't 100 feet off the ground. I'm guessing probably 60, 70 feet. And it came up to the beach, and as I was looking at it, it suddenly just kind of exploded into a very bright, what I believe is a plasma ball. Basically, it just turned into this big blob of plasma. It was very busy, and I felt it when the transition happened. It was almost kind of a boom, this sort of this feeling in the environment, but I didn't feel any heat coming off of it, which was to me surprising after I looked into it more and understand what plasmas are. And then it proceeded up the ravine in the direction of Keopuka Heights, and then disappeared over the ridge. Of course, it's a visual observation. It had nothing to do with me. I was just there, and it was one of these things that the villagers had been telling me had been happening for a long time. And I was just there one day, and it happened. I have tried amazingly to get people to come and sit and help me stake that place out. Get whatever little bit of money we need and some decent equipment, and just sit there and give it the 90 days or whatever it takes to catch this in action. And it's just remarkable. People want to know where the site is. They want to know all about it, but and they even want to impose their own ideas and their own agenda on it. They want to go there on their own, but they don't want to work in a group and do the kind of work and observation that's credible to the greater science community. You know what I mean? It's all about being the one.
Yeah. So there, I guess maybe that's an American thing, because I know, for instance, like the organization that put out the Sigma 3 report that just came out a while ago, they've been wanting to go ahead and collaborate with people in America for some time with regards to the data that's available, and they have a lot of stuff that's from France that's just phenomenal, but they're unable to get data sets and stuff and sharing coming out of the United States.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, there are a lot of really good researchers out there, but the standard, the research standards, people talk about scientific standards and research standards and so on. It's really the publishers that hold the reins for all science work in terms of it being published in any branch other than ufology, medicine, anywhere. They all have journals, and the journals have rules, and those are the research standards and the publication rules that you need to know if you want to meet a scientific standard and move information forward, to the greater community. And one of those rules is that you take your data, if you are offering a paper that's based on data, all of that raw data needs to be posted in a public repository for at least 5 years, so that other scientists and other researchers can have access to it and either replicate your findings or challenge them or use it in further research to move things forward. And you start talking that way to ufologists and they start panicking. It's there's a coveting to it. There's an inability to be part of the larger solution because they're too concerned about their own image and being the one. And the whole point with science is that you find a way to credibly collect data and you stand behind it. It's not about you, it's about what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It's rare in ufology. I put together a journal and I use the same standards as the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which are the Open Science Foundation top regulations, TOP, transparency and openness in publication standards, and it's for open source science. And I put that journal together, and I went out and I hustled people. I looked for people that were doing good work, that had good papers. I couldn't get anybody to step forward.
Speaking of data, does each airline have different guidelines to make a report and to hand a report on?
No. Because the FAA doesn't lead, nobody else follows. And some airlines have a real hostility around the whole subject, and others are just fine with it. We did surveys in a couple of regional carriers, but were roundly rejected by United and other national carriers. And for pilots, it's a competitive environment. The guy in the seat next to you is competing with you. And what you talk about while you're in the air and flying around could cause problems for you, depending on who's sitting next to you in the seat.
Yeah.
So they're pretty careful about it, and that's why they're so retrospect about even talking about sightings they mutually have when they're in the air.
Now, someone just asked, Bob Gray in the chat room wanted to know if your data is public. I know you put off a lot of reports and stuff, but your particular database isn't, correct?
It is. It is. Our original data was. I'm glad you asked that. Our original data was developed by Dr. Richard Haynes in a personal catalog that he put together called AirCat, and it's publicly available. It's at Rice University and at University of Wyoming, Rocky Mountain Repository. So all of that. There's 3,300 cases or so that are embedded in that, and the cases that are important are already referenced in other papers. So when I refer to those cases, I refer to the papers that they're in.
Didn't Bigelow want to buy the originals?
Oh yeah, so I'll tell that story in a second. But the other half of it for your listener here is that we collected about 1,300 reports spanning 100 years, and all of those are published in our technical report sections going up. Part of the problem was, again, I was dealing with Dr. Haynes, I was dealing with others, and they weren't adhering to this open science perspective either. Dr. H is a very bright guy. I worked with him, daily and weekly for 15 years. So I know what his strengths were, and I know where he wasn't so strong. And he had a real issue with security. And he played a lot of his cards close to his chest. He wouldn't share. And I found that with a lot of people there. And some of it was like Dr. H was a research scientist. He was working at Ames Research Center, and they were all targets of Russian intelligence gathering all the time. Wow. And because that whole area, right, Palo Alto and Stanford and all of that is, it's rich with scientists and innovation, military government work as well. So he was always paranoid about this. The first book Dr. H gave me when we started NARCAP was the Counterintelligence Manual of the KGB, if that tells you what I was dealing with. Okay. Wow. So, and I've since taken over NARCAP, and it's been, I've carried the ball forward because I participated in the research, and I'm published with the organization. So it's as much my work as his and everybody else that was in the group. But I haven't yet come to a perspective on how to set up a public database per se. I get pilot cases. I get military cases, and I won't share those. Mainly because our adversaries are very interested in them, and I'm happy to provide those names for congressional testimony or private briefings at a higher level, but not publicly.
Well, don't you get a bunch of nefarious actors who you see coming mining data off your site?
Yes, I get a lot of that, and it's interesting. Like the Chinese, for example, they hit my homepage to do the character count, right, just to see if my site changes, and it doesn't that much. And but then all of a sudden, like a news article will come out, or things will start percolating that are around the aviation end of the UFO spectrum, and then I'll start getting specific IP addresses pinging into my account from various cities. And given they have a closed internet, you got to wonder, what that's all about. But that's one example of what's going on out there. There are private security firms that are gathering data and information and preparing intelligence products for their clients, which may be state actors or private individuals, private researchers. There are research foundations out there looking into this that are private, that are managed by wealthy people and aren't well known. And they're looking into our material. And this isn't just us. This is anybody doing anything. Everything's being gathered up. You got Isaac Coy out there vacuuming up all that stuff, and who knows where he takes it. You've got the Swedish group, and I can't remember what their name is right off, but they've been collecting data for a long time. And basically, if you write it down and it says UFO on it, somebody's grabbing it. Your copyright doesn't mean anything with these folks. So there's a lot of things going on around the information, and it all has to do with drama and nonsense. And focus on moving forward, collecting data correctly, meeting standards of research and publication, start honoring a multidisciplinary journal, whether it's mine or somebody else's, but start accepting the fact that the information about UFOs is not yours. We all need it to understand it. This could be an existential problem, and we shouldn't withhold it any more than any country has a right to withhold UFO data from the rest of the world. It's like withholding an Ebola outbreak. You know, well, we're not going to talk about that.
Came forward since the congressional reports, like with Japan and other nations, where they were expressing they've had similar issues and concerns, and they want to form a corroborative effort, kind of on an international version of ATIP or the UAP task force, where they might want to form a collective through the different governments to come together on this now and try and collate their data.
I think it's absolutely important, imperative. And I think that along with the AIAA, the next level that we want to be knocking on the door of is the International Civil Aviation Organization. And we want working on this stuff. I was very heartened to see that Seth Shostak stepped forward from SETI to join the board of Avi Loeb's search for extraterrestrial artifacts.
Is that the Galileo project?
Yeah, the Galileo project. That's really important because Seth has long been, he's had to walk a tightrope, right? He's running a serious scientific engagement on a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and nobody on that side of the fence wants to talk about any data that's inside of our atmosphere, you know. And so he's had to walk this sort of image management thing to keep the organization credible. But look at what happened the first opportunity he had. He stepped over, and it's important. It's important to help move this thing forward. I am a researcher speaking with experience.
Yeah, personal experience. Incredible, as your reputation precedes you. So, people with your experience should be taken seriously. They can't selectively choose what they find credible with you and what they don't. They got to take the whole or nothing.
Exactly right. That's exactly right, Robert. But we have to do it in little steps. There's no way I could sit in front of the AIAA and talk about my personal observations.
Absolutely. At some point. But I'd like to think that since it's with the congressional reports, that we're going to have both government organizations that are going to form, like what I said, with a global rendition of ATIP, some to that effect, but also a civilian version of it, to look into the non-security threat aspects, like with what you're doing with the aviation concerns of them being a threat, potentially, just the various reasons, like you put out in your the pilot advisory that you have published on your website. So, definitely the security implications for the governments, but also the non-security, or just aviation security issues and things for the civilian portions of them.
Well, the whole issue has been relevant. What's relevant about UAP research, and why should anybody get a grant for it? Why should any money be released to do it? Okay. And I can think of a dozen answers, but people who aren't familiar with the subject can't think of one. Or people who think they know the answers can't think of one. There's a problem with all of this, and right now we're at a juncture where we're starting to step over that. They're not ready to talk about abduction phenomena. They're not ready to talk about CE 3, 4, and 5. Right? They're not ready to talk about little gray men in their ships. They're not ready to talk about ships. Okay, but they're ready to talk about looking at these things and not ignoring them anymore. And I think that the most likely, if you're looking for proof of a sea change, the FAA has to change its aeronautic instruction manual. And once it starts greenlighting pilot reports, and there's somewhere for those reports to go to get actually studied, then we can start thinking that there's a process in place now of some kind moving towards science. But frankly, this isn't a science problem. I've said this many times. This is not a science problem. This is a tactical problem. It's a strategic problem. This is a military problem. And these incidents should not be happening.
I was reading on one of the reports that Raytheon, both civilian and military radar, sorts the data out to what's recognized as aircraft and then what's other, like the number 5 bin on the UAP report, where anything that is not a recognizable aircraft gets sorted into a bin, and the military that basically a digital black hole where they don't do anything with the data. But the civilian radar obviously would have to have a way of discerning between what's identifiable aircraft and not, and that they don't comment on those either, because obviously we've got rules of engagement with the military to not fire. You know, if any foreign adversary comes into our battle space or airspace, if they don't turn away, then they get annihilated. They don't fire on these. They don't even interact with them. You know, and that's discerned with the radar and satellites, and you know, in part visual. But they obviously have been aware because they have these standing orders in place not to fire on them or engage them. So they've had to have been aware of them for decades now, at least, with the radar being able to make the discernment. So, you know, where up the chain of command did that stop being communicated that they have standing orders to not fire on unidentified, you know, UAP phenomena, and all others, you know, that it instantaneously collates between the two.
Well, let me roll back to your original comment about radar and detectability. Most of the air traffic control management systems are transponder based. You understand? And then they'll correlate it when the aircraft comes into controlled space. It'll correlate with a radar target, and that transponder signal will give it a radar. It'll identify it as an identified object. It won't show an unidentified object to a controller, a non-transponder aircraft. In most cases, the controller isn't going to know that it's there.
So it's not going to have the type of, most of them don't have the type like what the military does to.
No, it would be the military radars, or if somehow a pilot was looking at it and he alerted, the bunker at the airport, and then they could go look at it manually. You know what I'm saying? But the way the system's set up, everybody's got a call sign, everybody's got a flight plan, everybody it has a transponder, and they're pinging away with it, right? So they're detectable pretty much all the time.
They're tracking radio signals, not actual.
Right, it's tracked by satellite.
They're not reflecting radar signal, the radio signals off of the mast and another out here to get the signal back, like the military does.
Exactly, Robert. And then the other point with this too is, I mean, they are doing it, but there's an animation system that's in the way. Okay, and then the other point on all of this too is that we don't have that much radar coverage. I mean, our oceans aren't covered by radar. We have radar detection. You know, it'll range out to 30 or 40 miles of flat land around an airport. This kind of thing. It's local. Radar is local, and military radar
around the battle space.
I'm sorry.
I said I knew they had them around the military air bases and things that could discern different craft and things, and also around the battle groups and to some extent on the airplanes.
But they have a different control system, right? They have a different way of analyzing the airspace because they're looking for different things. They've got radar pickets that can track missile launch, right? But it's not an overhead picket; it's a vertical wall, right? So we aim it towards Russia, and it's a high wall, and anything that comes through that is incoming, right? But we don't aim it overhead over our own country and look at things that are coming from space and falling in as meteors or something.
Right. The virtual curtain. So to speak.
So the capacity is there, and I don't understand the whole system. It's complex, but there are reasons. We don't need to give the FAA a hard time at the controller or pilot level. That the issues with policy and what they do with the reports. So,
when my concern was what Mellon touched on was that where they do have our active radars that are able with the Raytheon to identify different targets and things, that he said unequivocally that when the radar can't identify a conventional craft or drone or whatever, that data is automatically sorted into another file, so they're able to discern actively in a battle space environment, at least, what's not relevant, what is a UAP essentially, and that they don't engage it, because if it were a foreign craft, they're not responding to radar or to radio, and they don't have a transponder. They're able to tell that's a UAP, or if it's a foreign adversary potentially. They go and engage those, but they don't the UAP. So
I got some of this is, if I could butt in really quick. This is a quick something from the audience coming in, Ted. When pilots report UFOs, they seem to be deemed unfit to fly and end up on desk duty. Have you heard about that one in the past?
There's been a chilling effect on reports because of retribution against pilots and air controllers for talking about what they've seen. There used to be a regulation in place that threatened them with 5 years in prison and a fine if they talked about it. But it was because airline pilots were forward observers before we had satellites. So if they saw, like a flight of backfire bombers heading from Russia to the United States, and they reported that, if they talked about it, it would then they'd be a security threat. So a lot of pilots were ordered never to speak of what they saw, and in some cases they did see UFOs. Then when we got satellite coverage and everything, the whole thing sort of relaxed. But the management and pilots have slowly weeded out of the system since, to the point where we've got people that are willing to talk about it, and people that are, officials that are willing to go on the record at some point on the phenomena. Some airlines have institutional bias, and that can get a pilot shut down. It has to do with his managers and his employer, but I haven't heard of any stories where the long bony finger of the men in black has reached out and told anybody to stop talking about it and fired pilots for it. It's a common thing to talk about it in ufology, but I haven't run across hardly any examples of it. I've run across many examples of pilots saying they were worried about it, and that's why they didn't talk about it, and that they had nobody to talk to about it, or everybody would think they're crazy, is kind of the gist of it. But I've never encountered anybody that actually that told me specifically that they were penalized for talking about it.
Right. But I know since I think it was either Rich, Rob, or Greg was mentioning about the new changes from the Air Force, and they basically told everybody. Was that you, Rob?
The Navy had their pilots to where they implemented a program in 2019, a system where they can report sightings that were encouraged, at least within the Navy, but not to, not to treat as classified or privileged information to where they can't discuss it with anybody else. But they do have a system in place that they were implementing to report it up the chain of command officially, to at least get it in the system through proper channels, but not encourage them to speak about it to anybody else that doesn't have the need to know.
And I think that actually there wasn't actually a memo that came out right after the UAP report. I think it was to the Air Force. People basically telling them the same thing. You can't talk to anybody about UAP. You can report it, but you can't say a word. So they're definitely still trying to, limit access to the data, limit, knowledge about it getting out. So they still want to
you can look at it that way, but I look at it differently. They're taking it seriously, and they think it's a security threat. We pay these guys the big bucks to be the biggest dog on the chain, okay? And if they think they're dealing with a security issue, and they order their people not to talk about it, I'm not going to second guess that. I think that's probably exactly right.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. On the flip side, these incidents occur in front of entire cities, and there's all kinds of steps we can take as civilian investigators to understand the scope and the nature of the problem better. I think part of the issue is that I don't encounter a lot of people that really understand how serious the data is. They don't appreciate it, and they don't appreciate the implications. So You know, over and over again, I run into people that say, "Oh, I'd love to have a UFO experience."
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
yeah,
Ted,
no,
I think you're not the kind of guy that prescribes that these things are all love and light, right?
no, no,
Yeah.
no,
I mean,
not at all.
I think one of the things you mentioned before too was, we need to stop, if you want to call it, equating human emotions and human thought patterns on them, because they're not human.
Well, that's the whole point. They're not even terrestrial. Okay, so we can't anthropomorphize. They're not like anything we've got, even if they look like it. Even if they've got a head and 2 arms and 2 legs, right? They're not us. They're not human, and they're not terrestrial, as far as we know. Okay, we've got nothing in common with them, as far as we know. And on top of that, their behavior, given their, I mean, obviously they could communicate with us if they wanted to, and they do not. And a lot of the behavior is intimidating. They don't respect boundaries or borders of any kind. And people will talk about, these experiences they have and everything, but the one thing that they can't do is stop them.
Yeah.
And, imagine, okay, you've been put through something that's pretty traumatic, and you're basically in tonic immobility, right? While little gray brother's, doing whatever he's doing to you. And then in the middle of this, or towards the end of it, he starts bombarding your frontal lobe with microwave to give you a real happy, up feeling vibe, right? And to send you on your merry way, remembering a happy vibe in your head while they basically vivisected you. I run into this a lot. On one hand, they have a horrible story to tell, and then
that feeling of euphoria that you get, Ted, it just kind of comes into you, and you don't care a thing about anything, and you just kind of listen to what they want you to do and just follow along. But the thing is, and the pain gets bad enough, and the fear gets bad enough, you can't have a breakthrough moment. And
that's right.
Those are the things that you have of the bad memories and different parts of it, because there was so much going on that your body was dealing with, that their ability to go ahead and keep you in that state just kind of, crumbles away.
Well, and then there's the other side of it, whereby, when you look back on what happened to you, you've got social stresses. You're a man, for example, and you can't admit that you're a victim. Okay. Men get sexually assaulted, high numbers, never talk about it. You know what I mean? And so it's a social construct that keeps us from, that doesn't protect us. It keeps us being violated and keeps us in that space where we're just supposed to be strong, and it doesn't happen, right? Just suck it up and move on, And the same thing goes with these kinds of experiences too. So if you're a man who's been exposed to this and suddenly been crippled and had something shoved through your head or something, you're not going to want to talk about it to anybody, just because of the sense of weakness and helplessness.
And it leaves you feeling vulnerable and not in control of your environment. How do you reconcile that at some point? I've been through situations in my past where were beyond my control, and I in conventional parallels like I've had, I was able to overcome those and adapt and find ways to compensate to where I knew that would never happen again. But on something of the magnitude of abductions and things, how would you ever reconcile a feeling that you would ever be able to prevent something like that from happening, where you're always left feeling vulnerable to some extent? That I think, on some aspects is, it's hard to reconcile, to find peace with.
You can't, and you don't. It's so, you know what tonic immobility is, right? It's when you arrive at a point of terror and you can't move.
Yeah, I've had I've had sedated major spine surgeries where I was awake in case they hit a major nerve. I could yell "ouch," but I didn't care. But still felt it.
Right. And so, tonic immobility is this thing where you're frozen by your fear, and it happens to animals. If you ever run up on an animal, it just hookers down and sit there. That's what's happened.
It's just a night terror, Ted. That's all it is.
Right.
I'm joking. That's because what they always want to try and classify it as.
So when you have that level of fear embedded in you, you may not even remember the incident. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The intellectual self wants to suppress it from the emotional self. because the mind emotionally can't cope with it. So the intellectual self hides it. That's the kind of way the the psychology of the mind works. It's split into two halves.
But I found that memory is stored in a circular structure in the brain, and we know about this. And the brain recycles these memories within different parts of the brain within kind of a circular fashion. And I've seen it, and how I felt it and how I got past it was you can't, if you want to call it, get a direct connection to the memory because they've blocked it. They've prevented you from being able to get to it. But you'll have these little things where you have an associative kind of event or something else that happens, and all of a sudden a memory just comes in and it's just back with you, and it's just like, holy cow, you get enough of those going on and figure it out. And it's just being able to find out, what can I do to potentially get close to that, to be able to get to the information that I need. But the question is, sometimes you don't want to have it because you don't want to know what the other thing was.
It takes a heck of a lot of personal fortitude to confront these things. People wonder why I'm immersed in martial arts and meditation and freediving. Why do I do these things? Well, this is why. I have PTSD and I'm a nervous wreck. And at any moment, I could walk out my door or not and find myself confronted with something that the world doesn't even believe happens.
That's what I was telling Thomas, is that I definitely could recognize the PTSD implications. I deal with that myself on other issues, but I could see how you were trying to get control over your life with these other aspects that gave you peace of mind and control. But the PTSD is always there, and the sense of vulnerability is always in the back of your mind. So you're always compelled to try, train harder and push yourself harder, and to not let your basically idle mind is the devil's playground. So in other words, you just keep moving forward and never stand still to try and outrun
and never let your guard down.
Okay? Yeah, exactly.
Hyper vigilance. I can't go outside without looking up. I just can't. And the thing that people don't understand about PTSD is it complexes. So the UFO experience may have scared the bejesus out of you, right? And you feel vulnerable and everything, but that's not necessarily why you have PTSD. Okay, you have it because you felt that way before, and it's complexing on it. My relationship with my father was terrible and frightening. Okay, when I was a little kid, right? That was the only time I felt anything close to the terror I felt in the presence of these things. And I never resolved the problems with my father and my family, and I didn't resolve the issues with the UFO, so they're all networked together. One of the exercises that people with PTSD do, some people do, is they try to recreate the trauma in a way where they come out on top. And a lot of times, it's kind of like, after a fight and you're sitting around afterwards going, well, I should have, and you're reimagining it, only you're imagining it in a way where you won in a different way, where you came out on top in a different way. I used to imagine that being approached with these things was like being in open ocean and being approached by a giant shark.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest fears is shark attacks, because you can't see them coming and you couldn't stop it if you did.
Right. So I went out. I taught myself to free dive. I learned where the best free divers in the world were, and they were training in Hawaii. So I was working in San Francisco, and I would go out and rent a car and go live on the beach and free dive with these guys, and do it every weekend almost, or at least one weekend a month. And then when they started training people, I was right in there, and I took training from the best in the world, and then began to teach on my own. And then in the process of doing that, I was out in open water, and I had a massive tiger shark roll up on me, probably a 15-footer, really a big one. And she rolled right up to me, and I looked her right in the eye, and she turned and looked at me, and I was so overwhelmed. It was so beautiful, and I was like, I said to her, I had no idea. I look at you, I had no idea. And then she turned around and bolted away. Turned out what had attracted her was a fisherman had thrown a marlin head off the boat ramp, and she was coming up near the boat ramp.
Interesting.
Following that chum line. So my point is that shark was nothing like the UFO, and the UFO that flew by me didn't have the same effect as the ones that have when I've had their attention. I watched it go by. It was disturbing, but it's what I do, and it's the work I do, and I was just in a place to observe it. It didn't threaten me, but the ones like the one I saw in Oakland, it came from 4 or 5 miles away and stopped less than its own length from my car. You know,
Yeah,
it was
targeted
there
you
for
out.
me. Yeah, it was there for me, and that's a whole different sensation than any type of I've ever experienced. And I've had a very adventurous life.
Yeah, I know what it's like, Ted. People, you can't see this now, but I just turned myself into a kid using a snap camera lens. And the thing is, when I go ahead and make myself look like a young kid again, and I start talking about it, all the protections, all the things I can have for dealing with it and not having the trauma and everything dealing with it, as I try to get this off because it's rolling in right now, goes away. And it makes it much more difficult to talk about and to deal with it, just because it's just you're kind of seeing yourself back at the point much nearer in time than when this shit was still going on. And yeah, you will try to reframe it, but when you bring it back and it's that real, or at least have high a look and stuff, that just gets hard for me, at least.
Well, you know, the best thing I've found in all of this is that it's kind of like, you know, I use the analogy of freediving because when I train my swimmers, I have a line, right, with a float on the top of it. It's on the surface, and the line goes down to 120, 130 feet, not too far, but it goes down a little ways. And if you want to get into my advanced or my intermediate class, you have to be able to swim to 100 feet and back. So you need to know how to equalize. To do that, you're demonstrating all your skills, right? And it's about a 35-second swim down and a 35-second swim back. It's not a Herculean kind of thing, but it's 100 feet. And I take them out there and I have them pull down the rope. So they breathe up, they get upside down, and then they use the rope and they pull themselves down the rope, going down deeper and deeper. And I use that as a meditation and tell people this is what you do to get in touch with your past. You pick this strand, this rope of your experience, and you go down that line until you get to the point where the trauma was. And there you are standing there, all wide-eyed, little kid, got nothing. Adults aren't looking out for you. And it's going down, right? What did you need to hear? And tell yourself that. You know, you'll probably shed a tear or two in the process, and you may have to do it, you know, 3 or 4 times, but it takes the sting out of it. My goodness, just to have even telling yourself what you needed to hear, whether somebody else did or not. You know,
literally taking control and pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps to show that you can have some kind of semblance of control over it.
That's right.
Get control. That's kind of what I helped found a Battle Buddy Foundation that helps nonprofit veterans at risk with PTSD and things. In 2012, I helped found that organization because I saw the need with the PTSD issues I faced, and that so many veterans that I knew. When I became disabled myself, with all the idle time, I couldn't get out of the house for about 4 to 5 years that I was so chronically sick. So I started investing, talking to people online, and got involved with Battle Buddy Foundation. And I ended up even filling calls for a long time for people in crisis. When they try and call the Veterans Hotline, they tell them to make an appointment, but they need to talk to somebody right now. And they would post on Battle Buddy and say, "Hey, I need to talk right now." And they'd shoot them my number, and 24/7 I was on call because I'm not going to let them. If I can help it, I'm not going to leave somebody hanging out there. No matter what the inconvenience is to me, it's not anything compared to what they're going through. So,
I just want to say to the listeners out there, send a couple of nickels to Battle Buddies, okay? Battle Buddy Foundation. Seriously, okay? It's a very important organization, and
you know of them?
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah, it's very
BBF with Kenny Bass.
Mm-hmm. You guys,
he's an awesome guy, tremendous guy. I helped him get the funding for that and put him into the stratosphere with it, big time.
That's terrific because it's needed. It's very important. And, there's really no difference. That's the other thing that I wanted to say about PTSD, just sharing it, that all PTSD is the same. It doesn't matter whether you got it because you fell off a cliff or you saw somebody die or you were grievously injured or anything else. It's the same thing. And so knowing that it's all the same, you can deal with it the same way. And like I said, when they're in crisis, have them tell themselves what they need to hear. Yeah,
okay, you can empathize with them even if you haven't been through the same experience.
Exactly. And just be there with them and hear them and hold space and tell them that it's over. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
There's
really
nothing more
important.
terrifying talking to somebody out of, having a gun to their head for 5 hours marathon, in the middle of the night.
Oh, I understand. We've got guys killing themselves at a couple of minutes here.
22 veterans a day and still 46 dying a day waiting on VA benefits and procedures. It's horrendous.
So anyways, it's very important work, and trauma, when it's associated, whether it's, an otherworldly encounter or battlefield issues, like I said, the same cure is there for it. You're not less of a person because you didn't get your PTSD from the battlefield. You know what I'm saying?
And it's not their PTSD isn't any less important or traumatic if somebody got it on a battlefield as opposed to not getting it on a battlefield. It can be infinitely more worse for a civilian that had been, raped or whatever, in a car crash and survived, things of that nature. So they can't minimize it,
No.
From either direction.
And it's really important because we have zombies walking around us who are, half gutted by their past, and the decisions they make and the lives they live are just sad. And they're standing next to you at Starbucks, they're all around you, but you're not hearing them because they quit talking. And, PTSD, it goes hand in hand with parental issues. Say you had a narcissistic parent or any other kind of thing. It can come from anywhere. So in my case, I'm damaged because I had a rough childhood, and then I had these incidents come up which really emphasized my helplessness. And it was my martial arts training. It started as soon as I was old enough to know what they were. My family just derided me over it. And this is 1966, right? And I just kept training and kept training and kept training all my life. I trained right up to today. And it's kept me alive. It's literally kept me alive, both in reality and in my own sense of safety and my belief that I can protect myself and others, or that I can at least try.
Yeah. Yeah, I had an extremely traumatic childhood and some very rough events. My young adult life. So yeah, I kind of overcompensated for a few years of fighting. Hundreds of times full contact. I was a heavyweight. Never got put down physically. I just was a rage. My PTSD fueled it for such a long time until I felt comfortable enough that I was so confident in my abilities that I could finally calm down, that I wasn't, I could handle whatever came my way and not feel vulnerable. And that allowed me to relax and finally find some peace with it and move forward with my life and, and put that away.
Yeah.
I always kept training and maintained my ability to protect myself and the loved ones and anybody else around me that didn't start it. I'd finish it just because I don't like seeing people suffer. So that's partly why I couldn't stay isolated, because I just can't be out around society where people treat each other so bad and not get involved.
I'm the same way. I will not tolerate bullies. I won't tolerate anything that's cruel, not to people, not to animals. I just, you know what I mean? And it's because I've been that guy. I've been that animal. You know what I mean? I've been on the
me too.
And not
I'm a bully's worst nightmare.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So while
that's why I'm doing
go ahead.
Why I'm doing for ufology. That's why I'm talking about my experiences now, even though it could hurt my image a bit. With the people I'm trying to impress, they need to understand too that this is bigger than lights in the sky.
Right.
And relate to the game.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like we had Dr. Don Dendaria on, I believe, last Saturday. And he had said that, yes, I mean, the way he looks at it is, yes, there are UFOs flying around in our skies. There are those UFOs some of them are piloted by extraterrestrials. And some of those extraterrestrials are going and abducting people and doing things who don't want them done to them. So it's just us being able to jump into that paradigm of understanding and get, society out of the whole area where it's saying, okay, you're a bunch of crazy people wearing tinfoil hats. But the reality of it is that no, a lot of this stuff is real. And the people who should be wearing the tinfoil hats at this point are the ones like Miss Mick West and everything else who just want to take all of this and just kind of say it's not real.
Exactly. And there's a little problem with all of this too. Okay, here I am. I'm an experiencer, right? And for some reason, I end up running the premier research team with the best minds in the field. Jacques Billy was on our staff, Dr. Bernie Heisch, Dr. Richard Haynes, Don Ledger, so many, a bunch of aviation and NASA people that you wouldn't know, but who were eminently qualified to be involved. And so I was an experiencer, and I found myself plugged into this spot where all of a sudden now I'm an administrator, and I'm having to learn science, and I'm having to learn how to run a research team and how to manage our image and so on. And and we did some things. We came up with the UAP term. We did a bunch of stuff to make all that work. And I did it by putting the organization first and focusing on professionalism. And then I turned around and I look at ufology, and I'm trying to figure out who to pull in. And it's really a challenge to get the people we need to look at this and to move the ball forward. I want, I think we all need to know this information. I used to be a little standoffish about the idea of everybody needs to know about UFOs, but I'm coming to feel like they do. I mean, if we're going to be aware of that they're here, then we need to be fully aware, and we need to understand whether we're safe or not.
Yeah, and that's why I've gotten into this, is that I see the potential, not just national security risk, but the risk to all humanity, because we don't know what their intentions are, and we definitely know that there's nothing that we have in our arsenal presently that we're aware of that can stop them, at least on a scale that would give us a fighting chance yet. But yeah, I've kind of diverted from my other research topics to invest in this, with Thomas in the last couple of months and things. I'd been researching ancient history with the megaliths and things of that nature that I was pursuing the physics aspects of for the last 30 years as a hobby. But this is kind of taking the forefront, recognizing that this is such a cluster, cluck, with not being a coordinated effort to try and discern what this is and what kind of threat implications it has, and that it is there and it's real. And what are we going to do about it? And I stress the we, because people need to pretend it doesn't exist, get their heads out of their asses, and collectively start, like with this seminar that you have coming up. That's an excellent step forward with this.
It's a baby step, but the thing is that a lot of us, we're here because we've got the experience, and we've got a kind of an instinct for how things ought to go, and based on what we've seen, what we've thought this thing through. Me, I haven't been able to live a normal life. I've had to spend most of the last 25 years on this, and I probably have at least a master's degree in UAP studies, in terms of the history of it and the physics of it, and the
you're at PhD level by now, Ted.
In the experience of it, but that's the point. Who can get a degree in UAP studies? But the whole thing is that I had to be self-trained. I mentored with these guys. I learned from Billy and all of these other guys how to do science around all of this, and it's so preliminary. Everything that we do is so preliminary, and it's all going to disappear as soon as there's a really good collection of hard data. You understand what I'm saying? All the work that we've done up to this point is going to become irrelevant when real current data starts showing up that's supported by qualified observers. Yeah,
something that they can quantify and build a solid platform on, and not speculation for a hard, concrete, irrefutable data and facts.
Right.
And I did notice that they mentioned in the seminar that you're coming up, I'm not really sure what to call it, but that they didn't want anyone advancing any postulations on what, maybe piloting, if these are piloted craft, don't bring up any talk of that. We just want to focus on the craft, not what's, who or what is behind them or in them. Which I understand they need to keep it on topic.
Jump in really quick. I just need to do a quick, they call it reset of the room here, where I just want to go ahead. There's been a bunch of people who've been coming and going off from the chat, and I just want to go ahead and welcome everybody who may have just jumped in as we've been talking about this. I'm Thomas Spesser, your host. I've got my two panelists, Rob and Greg, here with me. My partners in danger, or whatever you want to call it. My mind's a little fried on that point to a degree. And more importantly, I've got Ted Rowe right now on the phone with us. He's the director of research and the co-founder of NARCAP, which is the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena. We've been talking about Ted's experiences, his involvements, where he's, where NARCAP has been going, and we're just kind of talking about the phenomena and how we're dealing with it again. So I just wanted to, if you're new, if you could do me a favor, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. Say hi in chat. Make sure we can go ahead, make you a moderator and all. We'd love to have you as part of this family going forward. We work hard to bring you great content, and we really appreciate you coming out today. All right, Ted, back to you. Sorry.
Not at all, and I'm happy to let's involve some of your listeners here. If you've got questions, I'm happy to field some of them. This is all important conversation, but we need to, make it an open tent.
Oh, absolutely. And as we get more things out, if you guys have any more questions on different things, if you could go ahead and just throw them out there, flag my name with an @Thomas Spessler, or throw them on all uppercase, and we'll bring up the questions for Ted. That'd be great.
Hey,
Yeah,
Ted.
no problem.
Hey Ted, how do you think they're going to dole out the science for this, like from government's hand to say university science or individual scientists? Do you think there'll be maybe we were talking a couple days ago, maybe through NASA's hands, maybe that they can start to dole out that, and who decides who gets what at that point? Also,
I got a hunch that there will be some help through the NSF, National Science Foundation, and I. Part of the conversation with the AIAA thing is to stimulate funding, and it could be government funding, it could be university private funding. Various physics departments that decide they want to try and bite this off and come up with the money for it. And there are private individuals, as Avi proved, that are willing to throw some money in the bucket. He got $1.7 million for his project. Okay. Erling Strand at Hestel in Norway got about $300,000 over 3 years to run a research program there on that hotspot there at Hestel. And if your listeners aren't familiar, that you might want to look that up. Erling Strand, Hestel in Norway. He's had automated cameras capturing UAP activity at a hotspot for almost 30 years. He's an engineer at Oxford College.
Do you think if you never saw the things you saw as a child, do you think you would be this much into it if you never seen anything in your life? I mean,
absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would rather do anything other than what I'm doing right now. I'm a very creative, active, adventurous kind of person, and the reason I do this work is because it terrifies me. I'm tired. I don't like watching humans whistle past the graveyard while an existential threat is buzzing around. You look across this country and it all looks nice and normal, right? You see the ISS looking over the world at night, and there's all these cities and all these lights. It all looks so nice and homogenous, but you know what? There are little spots of science fiction going on down there, and it's terrifying. And they want not be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And if we have visitors, they should stand off the Lagrange point or the moon or something and announce themselves, like that good company does. What's happening here is something else, and I'm not an expert in game theory, so I don't know whether they're just keeping us at arm's length while they're doing what they do and there's no consequence, or whether they're building to a crescendo of some kind. People say, well, they've been around forever and they haven't done anything. But what is forever? Because people report temporal effects around these incidents. Yeah. These guys may not even, they might not even occupy our timeline. And then the other side of it is that they may live a hell of a lot longer than we do. And 100 years is nothing if they've got 500 years.
Well, if they're inside of a temporal time-space bubble around their craft that's created by a gravitational warp field that exhibits the same properties of what you see as gravitational lensing from a black hole, their ability to manipulate time, space, gravity, and everything, they could be, that area around them could be preventing that kind of an aging and stuff from going on, Ted.
Well, exactly, and that's my point, is that that's part of my argument against anthropomorphism when studying these things. First off, we want to know whether they're a security threat. And the way you do that is judge them by their actions. You know, you look at all the organisms you know anything about, and they all have security. Every one of them has a boundary, and every one of them has a response if that boundary is crossed. Okay,
Yeah.
every single one of them does. And that, as below, so above, I'm sure out in the universe it's the same thing amongst all organisms. They've got limits and boundaries. And our emotions are based on how those boundaries are managed, right? How our boundaries are managed, the sense of violation we have, or the sense of well-being with others, because our boundaries are right. And then you take it up another level, and you see that our politics and our negotiation are based on those same emotions that are established on boundaries and managing boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So
Expectations of rights.
So to say that they don't understand our boundaries or something is ridiculous. They know full well, and they know full well you're protesting when they come to get you. Okay, and they know full well that what they're doing is alarming.
Yeah.
Okay.
With all the research I've done in ancient history over the last few years, especially, I see incidences where, you know, this may not be the first time humanity's encountered beings that are a lot more advanced than us. And whenever they meddled with humanity before, it didn't work out so well, creating an imbalance among different civilizations and things. It's been the common theme each time that that's manifested. I think this time around, and it may have happened in ancient times. I really don't want to talk on that right now, but with the way humanity is advancing with nuclear weapons and proliferation and the struggle for power, and with it's no shock to anybody that China has global conquest aspirations of everything under heaven, that it's just a matter of time before we have another war, and they're not shy about using nuclear weapons, especially if they're losing a war. So I keep going back to this, you know, with advanced scouts, you know, from the training I've had in the military and things. The best indication of what your adversaries are interested in is, you know, where are they spending their time reconning?
Exactly.
With them around all the nuclear capabilities on the planet, civilian, military, and otherwise, you know, in increasing the frequency and the numbers of that around these craft, and the intimacy as well as moving in closer, they're increasing volume, frequency, and closeness of it. So, you know, they're in, like with going over, turning off nuclear silos and turning on the Russian ones, and finding the cap points, things like that. You know, they're indicating that they know everything that we are planning. So they would be in a better position to know what each global human government players are, what they are planning short term and things, and they would know who's planning for war, you know, or a sneak attack or something. They would be able to discern the nuclear clock better than, you know, most civilian human nations would. So, you know, it kind of lends to me that maybe, you know, I think there's different factions or whatever they are, but I think at least one faction is concerned with us destroying the planet. They don't care if we kill ourselves off, but they don't want us killing off the planet along with us. So it looks to me, you know, from my training and my background, that they're telegraphing they're not going to let us destroy the planet, and they have all their assets in place ready to step in. You know, they're close enough that they could stop whatever they need to stop when it needs to happen. And it's like with the craft that did try to engage him, like with the Iranians and things, they didn't crash their planes and things. They turned the electronics off. So it seems to me that they do have some rules of engagement, at least with the ones that are shadowing our military assets and things. But as far as the other ones that are, you know, are they the same that would be doing the alien, you know, human abductions and things? You know, I have no idea on that part. But it does seem like they're operating with some kind of rule of engagement to not directly get involved with us, you know, unless necessary, but it's nonverbal communication. But, you know, if they are trying to communicate with the nukes, we're not getting the message yet.
It's posturing. And on the flip side of it, you know, if I was a military planner on this side of it, you know, you've got a problem. There's a stranger inside the wire laying hands on your people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a very high security issue, and it's a big problem. And like you said, you know, gaining intelligence on where the concentration of behavior and activity is really important. If you want to start gaining insights into what their cultural imperative is, right? If you want to know why they're here. And I think that that's really the most important question. I've been working with, you know, advocating for pilots, and you're not crazy because you saw a UFO close up and this kind of thing, and working with the government so that people can, you know, avoid running into one if it happens, if they encounter it. But and the AIAA here, they want to catch some pictures of them going by, right, and analyze that. But the real questions don't have much to do with that stuff. The real questions are games of theory. Why are they here? What are they up to? How do they achieve their objectives? What are their supply lines? How many of them do you have to kill to get them to stop coming here? You know, and that's the kind of practical thinking that well, your average long hair doesn't want to take on. And I say that as a long hair. I mean, you know, your average person doesn't want to think about that. But I had to shed all my preconceived notions. That was part of my PTSD work and my martial arts work and my meditation and everything, was to train my awareness and to be aware of what's really there, not what I hope is there or what I don't want to be there or what I wish was there, but what's actually really there, and then live with it and deal with it.
You have to accept the situation, learn how to overcome and adapt to it if possible, or die trying. But I'm in the mindset, I'd rather fight this battle with my kids if it's going to have to happen.
That's right. You can't overcome it if you don't understand it clearly. Okay, and that's the issue. And people they'd rather whistle by the graveyard. You know, I'm sure there's listeners out there right now that would really rather think about them in a good situation. But think about
they're
it.
all just love and light and just send out happiness and welcome them and tell them to come down. And I'd like to take a picture of
Where's
you.
the record of that? Where's the record of that? It comes from people standing on podiums talking. It sure as heck didn't come from experiences. You know, I didn't have those kinds of experiences. I wouldn't wish what I experienced when I was close to them on anyone. And it should happen to me, and it should happen to most people. And when the powers that are start understanding the scope of this situation, that it's more than just, you know, lights in the sky or an aviation safety hazard, you know, that we're basically, you know, dealing with infiltration and maybe occupation.
If they had wanted to take over, they could have done it long before now, especially before now, when, you know, as we're building up our militaries around the planet.
Yeah.
Which tells me that they may not, you know, global conquest may not be what they're after, because like what Lou and other have admonished, you know, that this may be their planet as well, so at least some part of them,
Right. But
and
right
that they've
now
always been here and not wanted to get interfered. But now that we're destroying, you know, on the verge of destroying the surface, now they have to get involved.
Yeah. If I could jump in on this one, I mean, I've been seeing an escalation going over the last, you know, 8 months, 10 months that it's been since I've been watching what's been happening. Even in the Seattle, Washington area, we've gone up from seeing 1 or 2 at a time up to seeing 7 or 8 at a time. So there's a definite and definable, quantifiable escalation that's going on right now with where it's kind of like either they're trying to either show off to the military and saying, hey, you know what, here's our numbers, you can't stop us and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop us on this, or it's something that's being put out towards the public where they're saying, hey, look, we're here and there's more of us this time, and look, there's more of us next time. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, I was going to say, is it Greg that was just speaking a minute ago?
Was it Rob?
The idea that they don't occupy us. You know, if you're sitting at the bus stop and an 800-pound gorilla sits down next to you, does he have to say or do anything to control the situation?
No,
he's in charge.
Yeah, I understand the nonverbal control methods of intimidation and things.
This is absolute,
which unspoken there.
just their presence and their capability settles the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't move the way they do. Our best hope are these new laser systems as far as defensive weapons go. I just saw a mandate for all military fighter craft to be equipped with laser weapons. That just came out recently. And there's a lot of laser research and laser weapons research coming up, and they're fast acquisition. They can acquire and take a target out in 1 to 2 seconds.
There's also another fast, there's another high energy weapon that's not a laser that they're implementing. I can't remember what the name of it is right now.
Uh-oh. Rob, we lost your audio, Rob. Talk again.
Is it back?
You're back now, yep.
Okay, Rob.
Go ahead.
Okay. And where was I? I'm sorry.
Lasers, Rob.
Yeah, there was another weapon the militaries are advancing besides lasers that they're putting out with the military, a high energy type weapon. I can't remember what it's called. It's a high energy burst.
It's like a pulse cannon.
It's a directed energy.
Yeah,
yeah,
something of that nature.
The main thing is acquisition, and then being able to hit it before it moves. And if they're even if they've got AI that's agile, we'll never be able to actually target one. You know what I'm saying? That by the time the targeting lays on it, that it's going to be in motion. Anybody with a rifle has had that same problem. Every time I've heard about people pointing guns at them, they move. You know, they seem impervious to normal ordnance. But I just wonder, you know, at some point we're going to be able to do something about it. But right now they're the biggest dog in the kennel. And I think people really need to change the way they think about all this and get away from. But you know, your average person can't live in fear all the time, and that's what we're asking them to do. Basically, is to accept that along with all the other problems we've got in the world today, we got aliens, and they're not nice. Okay, and
yeah,
a lot of people would rather whistle past the graveyard, and you know what? Let them. Okay. Because there are those of us who are on the ball and are trying not to, but if they can't and they can't muster it, they shouldn't be there. You know?
Yeah, if they're not relevant, they don't need to be involved.
That's right. That's right.
You know, they're just spectators at that point.
And that's part of the reason probably why there wasn't a lot of discussion about this 30 or 40 years ago in the public domain. You know, they shut down Blue Book, and by then they'd shifted everything to the Navy. So, you know, it all. And they don't talk about it in public because what's the one way, you know, I mean, what is an invasion?
But you know, but really we have to stop calling them aliens. That's just racist. We have to call them migrant terrestrials, you know? They're coming from someplace else. They're trying to get here, you know? They may not be alien to themselves, but to us, I guess, but.
Well, you know, if you ever saw that movie Mars Attacks.
Oh, we got ack in the chat right now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Okay, ack, right back at you. But you know, the Mars Attacks scenario is a situation where you had a lot of opinion, and the ones that counted weren't heard.
Yeah.
And the military was sublimated by the science community, and by the indecisiveness of a scientist who wasn't a military man, right? Pierce Brosnan's character, right? And the end result was too little, too late, and it was bare luck that we found a way to take them out. Now, yeah, it was a comedy show, but that's not a funny situation, and it's the one we're in right now. Our society is divided on this subject. We have a lot of Christians who identify this with Christian mythology. We have a lot of other folks that want to go in another direction with it, and I think, you know, like with any guest, they have to prove themselves, and the proof that we're getting right now isn't good messaging. They're not being good guests. They may own the place or they may occupy the place. I think that's probably a way to look at it. But they're in charge and they're not going to take anything. I don't understand why they haven't gotten terribly involved in terrestrial affairs. You know what I mean? At least out overtly.
Have you studied much of ancient history?
Well, a bit of it.
We could have a talk sometime on that, and I could kind of get you up to speed on some of it. I could even put a report together for you on the mythology and the ancient papers that are out there that all have the same core theme. You can take the religion out of it, but they all have the same essence of how it transpired in ancient times. It seems history repeats itself, but it seems like there's a higher order of rules of engagement to where they don't interfere in the affairs of man. And that's not just the Judeo-Christian theology. It goes throughout the Sumerian texts, the Vedics. There's lore in the Norse mythology and some of the ancient Aztec and things of that nature. Some of the earliest transcripts that we have available on the planet, they echo earlier times of similar occurrences of humanity being tampered with, and that that they had benevolent and malevolent entities that fought for control, and several times over. It seems like to gain to see which one would come out on top, and then to allow humanity to move forward without their interference, without direct intervention. And it seems that was the faction that potentially went out. And I know a lot of that speculation, obviously, but it does kind of fit the pattern. If you want the best indicator of what's going to happen, look at what's happened previously. And that's where I got intrigued with doing the deep dive research into the past, and along with some other minds that have been researching this for at least 20 years. It just seems like it's repeating itself, and there might be some answers in there for you at some point.
It never hurts to look at the past. Okay, but we need to understand it. Understand what we're looking at. And a lot of times it comes to us in bits and pieces, and we don't get the context. So we the things that we see don't might have an explanation that is counter to what we expected or what we imagined that they see. And I'm a little careful about all of that. I spoke with Aboriginal people in Australia, on the northeast coast of Australia, and I asked them about UFOs, and they didn't have a word for it. Now you're talking about a 50,000-year-old culture that that does everything with words. It's an oral tradition. They know everything that ever happened to any of them, and they know all of them by name. Right, and they know their families, and they know where they were, and they know where they fell, and they know everything, right? About their lives for centuries back. Yeah. But they don't have a word for UFO, and they're as terrified of them as everybody else. And then I turned around and I spoke with Hawaiian Kumu. I kind of got involved with the religious side over there. I'm not a religious man, but I was invited to be part of it by Aka, and sort of initiated, and as a pahuna, that's what they call them. But the Kumu said that they didn't have UFOs in Hawaii before white men came to Hawaii.
That's interesting.
And they have a very strong. They talk a lot about balls of light and other types of phenomena there, and all kinds of things are seen, including what I related earlier in the talk. Lots of underwater light, that kind of stuff, all of that, and it's all right here in the folk anecdotes. Waiting for science to take it seriously enough to sit and watch and see. For me, compulsion is rewarded. I go to these places. I give up everything to be in these places where these things happen, and things happen there. And they're not just to me. But if you don't go and you don't listen to the people who are telling you where things are happening, then what? How good a researcher are you?
The people in the countries themselves will tell the researchers that we didn't build these structures. They were here. We were a legacy civilization. We inherited all these structures. But then the academics come in and tell them, no, you didn't. This is what we know, and we're going to educate you, even though you've lived here, since the time immemorial. We're going to come from the outside and tell you what your history was. It doesn't work like that.
Well, it does, and particularly if you're chasing down a particular kind of story and you're trying to understand it, like UFOs. And you want to see what that culture has to say about it, and if they're telling you that there's a place where they happen, I don't think you can judge them without going to that place and watching.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they had. Who would know better than the people experiencing it?
That's right. So, there's a site I've been working inside the United States. It's within 100 miles of the premier atmospheric research university in the country. Within 100 miles of it, it was removed from the grid on the BLM map is removed. The government hasn't allowed that site to be published since 1939. All right. And I've been on this site. I was there with Erling Strand for a week. And I've been there by myself. I've been there with others who might be known to some in the UFO community, Lester Velez and a couple of others. But, and I had remarkable observations and experiences there. So did Dr. Teodoranti, Massimo Teodoranti, and so did Erling. And here it is. It's right there. You know, it's less than 10 miles from a highway, and it's less than 100 miles from a major metropolitan area. And yet the information has never left the vicinity. You can talk to the locals; they'll tell you all about it. I had the place has a lot of rock art, right? And native people banging a lot of rock art into this place for a long time. And I'm out there with a little team, and we're trying to collect data. I'm trying to be a scientist. I'm having to learn. I'm new to all of that. And this guy shows up with his research crew, university guy, and he says, "So what are you guys doing?" You know, because everybody's kind of arranged where, you know, where they can triangulate our observations, right? And nobody's looking at the rock art. And I told him, I said, "We're looking at light phenomena." Called them earth lights, right? Just make it palatable. And he sat there and he looked at it all for a minute, and he looked at the rock art and he looked at me and he goes, "You don't suppose that this rock art has anything to do with these lights that you're looking for?"
Yeah. Hello.
Oh, we've had talks about that recently, Ted. We have rock art going back to Ethiopia that's probably 5,000 plus years old that has the same kind of carvings of it, the same crafts that we're seeing and recorded in wood carvings over Germany in 1461.
Yeah,
right,
1561. Right. We found that same horizontal black arrowhead-looking craft on Ethiopian rock carvings in mass.
Yeah.
So we found a lot of these shapes of UAP and things in ancient antiquity on some of the earliest carvings and things. So
yeah,
wow.
I'm not surprised. But here we are. You know, the information about the lights isn't moving, and it's more than lights, friends. A lot more than that, and that information isn't moving. And then there's research going on around there, but it's narrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's myopic, it's short-sighted, it's just dealing with one topic, right? And it's not even imagining that whatever stimulated that art is anywhere in the area still. No. Awareness is limited, right? This is an awareness problem. And our society, the way we train people to pay attention is
cognitive bias problem.
Yeah, it contributes to a lot of our failings, our perceptual failings, our psychological failings, our intellectual failings, all relating to failings in awareness. And the only way that you can have your awareness working for you and fully open is to release all preconceptions of how reality ought to be and let it be what it is, and start trying to understand what you're looking at.
Let the data drive the narrative, not the other way around.
That's it. Don't project, and it'll talk to you. And you walk around that site where the rock art is. There are human-like figures standing there, surrounded by round balls. Okay. Well, I had a night there where I was a human figure surrounded by round balls. Okay, and it you know, so for me it was pretty clear they were documenting something that somebody experienced because I'd experienced it too. You know. And that, you know, that's just tip of the iceberg. We had a night out there.
Discern that there was a craft or something physical inside the entity, so it was probably something of intelligent design, is what you're thinking, right?
Well, that was the Hawaiian one, but this one was out in the desert, and it involved a number of lights, mobile lights of varying sizes, and some I'll tell you, you know, when you start getting exposed to this stuff and you're standing there looking at it, it's real, it's right there in your face. It takes everything you can pull together to just force yourself to be involved, because it's so fantastical that your mind is repelled by it. It moves away from it.
Yeah, you can't disengage your emotions to logically take in, you know, what you're experiencing and analyze it, you know, objectively.
It's tonic immobility. You just shut down. You know what I mean? I stood there at the end. The whole situation was still going on. Lester was standing next to me. Nancy was standing next to him. We all had cameras. Lester had tried to take a couple of pictures, but it was still analog cameras, right? It was in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. And so we're all standing there, and this thing is in front of us, and it's not far away. It's maybe twice its own diameter from us, and it's probably 15, 20 feet around, and it's at ground level. Okay, it's right in front of us, and it's there, and then all of a sudden it moved away, and I'd seen a bunch of other things, and there were things behind it, and then it just like all three just kind of I felt like I'd been vacuumed, like all my feelings and everything had just been vacuumed, and we all just kind of turned around and we walked back over to the campsite where the truck was, and we just walked away from it. Nobody got the cameras up to really catch it or anything. It was so beyond what anybody would expect. I would just imagine some of these AIAA guys finding themselves in a spot like this and being overwhelmed what's actually possible versus what they imagined is possible.
Was that something that was recurring at that site, or was that a new phenomenon?
No, that's been going on there for a long time, and you can see the native people came there to sit and watch it, you know, and document it.
I've read some studies to where they found that the bedrock, when it heats up over the daytime, and where they have recurring lights near daily, that the bedrock has a high quartz content. So when it gets heated up during the day, at night, when it cools back off, that it compresses the quartz again and emits all these lights from them. Kind of the same effect that they had when that they've observed right before over fault lines, right before large earthquakes and things.
Wow.
So it's not rock gas,
but like
The pigeons.
Two statues of Memnon, they would sing every morning, but they figured out that the reason they did that was because however they were cut, when the sunlight hit them and they cooled down at night, and when they heated back up during the day, they had developed created them to where the quartz would vibrate and send out these tones where they would literally sound these harmonious singing sounds for over almost 1,000 years is what the legends go back to. So, you know, they knew how to manipulate that kind of stuff, but
the thing is that with you know, piezoelectric arguments for light phenomena, they're out there, and you know, they've done it in the lab. You crush quartz and you can get lights off of it and stuff. But we don't have a lot of quartz in this spot. This location is all.
It may be a small percentage, is what I'm saying, but you know that in small cases and small percentages that you know, I've seen that does happen, but it's not. By far, it's the exception, not the rule. You know, yeah, definitely, and that's not my opinion.
My opinion, based on experience in this place I'm looking at, excuse me, is that a lot of these phenomena are probably artificial, and I've seen like Oriflame Mountain in California. That's an example, I believe, of piezoelectric lighting. I've watched balls of light roll down that hill. It's over behind San Diego off of S2, Oriflame Mountain. And there's some others out there where I really do think that the natural explanation is correct. But this one, though, I was sitting out there one day and we watched a sheet of lightning coming up the river bottom. And it looked like it was about the size of the side of a semi-truck. And we videoed the thing as it was coming up. It got over the site itself, and there was a discharge between it and the ground, and it went a little further, and then it disappeared. So we turned the camera off, and then we went back. We took it apart 30 frames per second, right? So looking at it a frame at a time, and what it was a bar of light that was vibrating vertically at a rate that looked to us, our unaided eye, and at the speed of the camera, at 30 frames per second, to be a solid sheet of light. And then there was a definite discharge between it and the ground. And then a whole ring of little lights lit up in a circle around this thing. It moved into the center of this area, like for a mile around. Okay, and like every 5 degrees on the heading all the way around. And then it went out, and we turned it off because we didn't see those little red lights. They were showing up. They were on the bare edge of the sensor for the camera, so it was picking up near infrared that was just outside of the human visual ring. So, you know, I've seen things like that there, but the thing that confronted Lester and I was certainly not a natural phenomenon, whatever that thing was. Yeah, well, I'm not going to go into it in great detail, okay, but it was basically a giant white ball of light. And I mean a softly radiating white ball of light, probably 15 feet in diameter. And I kind of left the room when I saw a face in it. Okay, and that's the last thing I really recall. Lester said the same thing. He saw a face.
Yeah, it'd be unsettling.
The whole reason that I saw that it was there was that there had been a rumor of 5 balls of light that recur regularly on the rim of the canyon about 50 feet off the ground. And I knew exactly where that was alleged to have happened, and I knew the researchers that had seen it, and also I wanted to try and document that. And I came walking around the corner about midnight or a little after on a moonless night in Sun Beach. There was all 5 of them lined up, red lights lined up on the rim of the canyon, close, 100 feet away, and maybe 30 feet off the ground, maybe 40 feet apart, and looking all for the world like lights on the outside of a building. They look like they were fixed on something, you know, and then they would fade out and they'd come up, they'd fade out and they'd come up. And so I went and got Lester and Nancy and stepped forward into this open area, this bottom. There's a little mesa next to it all, and then the canyon walls. And so we're in this open area, and I started seeing lights, just odd lights everywhere. And then I saw something that looked almost like a bow tie. It had like a neon lining around it, and it looked like symbols in the middle of the thing, and it looked big. And then it started rotating, started spinning, you know, while I'm looking at the thing, you know. And at that point, I knew we were into something weird. And whenever I'm in that place, I start flashing back to other times when I wasn't.
Yeah, that's not a comfortable position to be in.
Yeah, and so I start freezing up, okay? And then the next thing I know, we're being approached by this giant white ball of light with a bunch of these other lights in the background, and then there was something, I don't even know what, and then we walk back to the car. And, you know, depending on who you're talking to, that's an angel, that's God, those are aliens, it's an AI.
Whatever the mind can match it to the closest cognitive
right. Or
card.
It didn't happen, and I just made it up.
All I got.
Yeah, or it didn't happen, and I just made it up, or.
But
I'm telling you what my nervous system remembers.
Yeah, I like them saying that it was mass hallucination, where they all imagined seeing something that didn't exist. That one really cracks me up when they try and use that excuse.
You know, and at the same time, all I've got is a story, right? It's a story, but take everything that we encounter about all of these phenomena and just throw it on the wall and call that the scope of the phenomena, and then start looking and watching and testing, and then you'll know what's real and what isn't. Okay, that's what science is. That's how you resolve these things. You don't just say, well, he doesn't sound very credible, he's a crackpot, and, you know, doesn't happen, can't happen, you know, just made it up. He's trying to make money off of it. And as everybody knows, I've never made a penny doing this. I've never written a book. I've never talked about these things until the last 8 or 10 months. But they're the culmination of 20 years of research, and then the things that caused me to get involved to begin with, and with empathy and sympathy for other people who have been through all of this and who are going to end up going through all of this. I put up crap that gets dished out and do what I do. I don't want to be the guy at the AIAA conference, you know, but guess what? That's what
better things with your time, but you feel compelled. Yeah. And I do some of the same things, not near on the scale you do, but I understand that compulsion to want to help others, you know, to become selfless, to put yourself out there because, you know, you feel like you have an obligation because you can, and you're in the position to be able to do something. You couldn't live with yourself if you don't do something with it.
Exactly. Exactly. The only difference between me and any listener out there that hasn't had one of these experiences is that they haven't had one of these experiences. It's not that they don't happen or anything. They do happen. It just hasn't happened to you yet. And in the current environment, it's a damned unhealthy thing. It can destroy your family. It cost me my girl. It cost me work. It cost me my image with a lot of people. And I'm still paying a price, you know?
Yeah. People say that Lou's profiting off of this. He didn't. He lost his entire, he gave up his pension, his career. You know, he loved the uniform. He loved working, you know, with the military, but he sacrificed his career to fulfill his oath. You know, and people don't understand that.
Right. Well, I serve too, you know, and this whole, and, you know, hats off to our brothers, but I just, that's the whole thing. I'm not going to let will whistle past the graveyard if they're strong enough to resist this thing and to understand it and to live with it.
Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Yeah. With the orbs and stuff, have you ever witnessed or gotten reports where it seems like the craft are drawing energy? You talked about sprites in one of your interviews that they observed. Have there been observations where it looks like the craft are receiving discharges of electricity or, you know, type of lightning or columns of energy or, you know,
yes,
transferring it one direction to the other?
Short answer is yes. A lot of sightings around dams, electrical generation plants, transformer stations, high power lines. And
is
I
that
think
when they kind of go, when everything goes black, when it kind of like it absorbs all the electricity out of the local environment?
Exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly. And the thing is that what we need is an examination of loss distribution factors on grid. Okay. So that for the distribution we have, how much are we losing? Where are we losing it at? And does it
anomalous significant measurements?
Right, exactly. And they have them. Okay, it's just nobody's done that work. It's another area that, along with aviation and everything else, I thought would be really helpful, would be to look at that. These things have terrific energy generation powers. I don't know if you looked at our technical report 12, that involves a small ball of light flying behind an airliner. And the thing's maybe 6-7 feet in diameter, right? And it's radiating. Okay, it's white radiating, and it's right under the tail of the airliner at one point. It pulled up from behind. A bunch of astronomers took those shots, by the way. And so the issue is, okay, if that thing is generating plasma, okay, enough to cover its entire surface and to continue doing it throughout, where the hell is that energy coming from? It's only 6 feet in diameter. You know what I mean? How does it? How does it
like a capacitor where they're drawing it from the environment because they have the means like sink that draws in the electricity from the environment. And I know they have to be able to generate some within themselves, but I think it's kind of like a dual fuel kind of thing. They can generate it when they need to, but if they can refill their tanks, you know, from an external source, they can switch over to that instead.
Well, yeah, and they may need to start it for some particular function, you know. But you know, it's just the energetics involved with all of this is, pardon me, is puzzling. Sorry, I've had a frog in my throat here for the last half hour. But you know, these are all the things that we should be looking at. I studied 100 American cases of where UAP affected aviation safety, and I found that 44 of them involved balls of light, and that all 57 of the cases that we found that had concurrent electronics failures during a UAP observation involved balls of light. So these are kind of clues that they're plasma generators, and whatever's generating that, whether it's an alternating electromagnetic field or whether it's a radio frequency generation or however they're generating it, it can have effects on avionics systems.
Yeah,
depending on what
altimeters, magnetometers,
yeah,
the whole gamut.
It just depends. And what I'd be curious about too to know is whether or not shielded aircraft experience the same kind of problems.
EMP shielded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because those F4s over Iran, remember in '76, the two F4s that closed on that it was a cylindrical UAP. They both experienced electrical failures, and I would assume they had some shielding.
You'd think, but it wasn't there also a Chile. They misidentified a craft. They thought it was a foreign craft. And they accidentally engaged the UAP that kind of went a little sideways for them.
Yeah, the second F4 came in and they got tone. The weapons wizard got tone, and they were going to fire on it, and they deployed a ball of light towards them. So they made a negative G turn and boosted out, and then at the same time that it deployed that ball, they lost their weapons array. They lost their system.
Wow.
So it targeted, shut them off, and it still let them fly away.
Yeah. So it shows that they have some kind of rules of engagement. We don't know why. Wouldn't want to surmise, like you said, but that's just another
way of revealing their presence than having them shoot down some of our aircraft. Okay, it doesn't serve them to do that, even if they're bad guys. You know what I mean? If they want to
why
continue
the hornet's nest up before you have to?
Right. Exactly. So
I think Greg had another question because he had done a bunch of research on this as well, but I know a lot of it. Rob did a bunch of research on this as well. Did you have something you wanted to bring up, Greg?
Oh yeah, just real quick. I was wondering if you had kind of seen any pattern, like do you like where we're headed in this whole area of UAP, and also do you think we will actually make it through this time as opposed to, like, say, the last 2 to 3 times?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a lot of it depends on how sincere these efforts are that we're moving, and whether or not that some counter operation doesn't shut them down later, right? Say we get some research going through the AIAA, and then all of a sudden the grants dry up, right? People get moved, things like that. So hopefully, if we get to a point where we're seeing mature research coming back, those are one of the things that we should look for, along with, like I said, the FAA opening up and allowing pilots to report, and a couple of other things. If all of these things can hold for a couple of years, and we can see some products like papers and studies and reports and questions and so on, then I'd say we're probably off the high center we've been on for the last 50 years. But until I see that, I have my doubts. The DNI played out pretty much.
Oh no, we lost Ted. Hopefully
I heard that.
One didn't die.
Yeah, I heard a boop boop boop. Yeah,
and I've got a double echo going here somehow.
Did we lose him?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's because I've got stuff coming in. Let me just change it from here back to. There we go.
Hello.
Hey, welcome back, Ted. You with us?
Yes.
Good. Yes. Excellent. Yeah.
Dropped or somehow. As I was saying, the DNI
you got blocked by the ETs.
Yeah, it happens. Damn DNI. There's somebody. But the DNI report played out pretty much as I thought it would. But I've been heartened by some of these other side developments, because the AIAA was in opposition to the government on this subject 50 years ago. And now here they are still doing it. And it shows a level of independence, but the question, like I said, is whether the resources to do the research dry up, and whether the people involved get repurposed and this kind of thing. So we need to see good research in motion with more products coming. And I think one thing that would be really helpful and to watch for, if you're looking for clues on all of this, is to look at the whether or not any of the proper science journals start carrying any information, whether the leading technical journals start carrying information. Publishing paper.
Civilian and private sectors both are investing money in this, where they see that if there's potential gains for a win-win situation of being able to potentially acquire some of the alien technology, so to speak, if they feel like that they would be able to possibly, say they fund somebody to reverse engineer anomalous materials, some groups may not, they may offer the funding, but they want something in return. But it may not be such a bad thing in some aspects, at least, with that.
Well, it could be, but it's hard to say. I think that personally, I think that most of if there is hard evidence, hard material, it's in the possession of government contractors, private industry,
and very high-profile private entities.
I think that, like, I think there's something valid to Colonel Corso's story. I know there a lot of people argue about it, but I did some research on his claims around night vision, and it hit dead center. So I went looking for Luis Alvarez's son, who turned out lived just a couple of blocks from me, and he had overseen the choices for the Army night vision program, and everything went down the way Corso said it did. But their argument, when they described it, they said that they were turning fiber optic fibers. That's what the night visions were made of, bundles of fiber optic, right? And they were turning it on the axle of an old Model A. That they were making fiber optic bundles in 1958 1958, 59 on by hand using it. It was the most ridiculous, stupid paragraph I read in the whole narrative. But I think there's something to what Corso had to say, and I think that if there's anything to the Roswell story, that those materials are distributed to private industry.
Yeah. I would. You would like to think that there's still some altruistic benefactors out there willing to invest in humanity. I don't know where Elon Musk stands on this yet.
What about Bigelow?
What, you mean there's not just a bunch of greedy people out there?
Well,
What's that?
You're talking about altruism and Bigelow in the same breath?
No, I wasn't.
The thing is that people are looking for power. The thing that scares me the most is that they're going to figure out how UFOs work and how they fly, and they're going to be able to make one. And then what's going to come next? They're going to strap a bomb to it.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that's partly what I think, that the DOD, the factions within them that have kept it secret for 75 years, I think that, part of the reason that they didn't let other areas of the DOD and Congress and the presidents know is I think that some of them wanted to actually try to reverse engineer and gain the power themselves, kind of like a real life, organization of Cobra or something, to come out and try and gain some kind of at least leverage, if not military dominance out of it,
Well, I wouldn't necessarily discard that even in the present. We have a very strong component in our politics that is very hung up on conspiracies and would really like to see the current paradigm just go away. That not that concerned with the Constitution and laws.
Yeah,
and
I have a problem with that.
And they're more concerned with empowering the rich and keeping that whole process moving for them. It's like the big break we had a couple of years ago, and who benefited? It wasn't you or me. I didn't come out ahead out of that. But so my point is that there are factions inside government and outside of government that have designs on this data and information. And that's what I'm talking about. They're data mining. They're looking for it. There's national players. There's state players, right?
Yeah.
Government. There's militaries. There's rich people and strong men that are into this stuff.
Yeah.
But at least now it's
to add to this
out in the open to where they have to acknowledge that it actually exists. So they can't keep it exclusive anymore. They were able to keep it an urban myth, but Lou forced it, along with the help of others.
But Rob, you got to remember, Lou was an individual. He may no longer be in the military, may not be working for the Pentagon, but he's still working as a government contractor, which means he's still representing a different part of government who's actually fighting and wrangling with Susan Goff of the Department of Defense and the Pentagon to get this information out.
I think that he's still working the narrative to push this forward where other organizations of the government are trying to hold it back.
Yeah.
Still. So I think that maybe he's been tasked with going global with it. I don't know. It's just
my
speculation.
fear in all of this is that there's a really good reason for it to be kept secret, and by forcing it out in the open, we may be hurting ourselves. It's always these issues with security. You know, who needs to know and why, and does everybody need to know? Well, it's America. Americans need to know, and well, maybe yes, maybe no. And
how do you feel about that, Greg? Do you think we should
Yeah.
know, or do you think it should be locked away still? Uh-oh, we lost your audio, Greg.
Of course, there's going to be some stuff that we don't need to know about. But then again, yeah, I think it's our God-given right to know if there are other entities out there, and for that to be kept from us for so long, it's not so good, and I like to see where it's going to go.
Well, and and that's fair. That's fair. I just think that when you're assessing a threat, how do you know that you're being invaded? Well, they come and they influence your society, and the most direct way for aliens to influence our society is for us to admit that they're there. And by doing that, we've got whole factions of society right now that would just as soon hand over control to aliens than to let our own
behavior modification. And I think that capitalism, if they could truly have the real communist utopia, they'd go for that. Well, they've not lived in a communist nation. They've never had to live under tyranny.
Well, and that's the whole thing. It's just all of these clashing philosophies, right, and perspectives, whether they're religious, whether they're patriotic or nationalistic, whether they're grounded in philosophical thought around kindness and goodness and openness, or whether they're based on perspectives of defensiveness or exploitation. All of this is at play right now. In individuals, it's in organizations, and it's going to percolate really hard in the future as more of this information starts moving out.
It's kind of like the saying, those who wish war have never experienced it. Those who wish for communism and totalitarianism or a benevolent ruler have never been oppressed, whether it's on an individual level or a societal level. They just don't know what they're talking about, or they would be fighting against it, kind of like we are.
Exactly. I tell you what the hell scares the hell out of me is that whoever comes up with this first, whoever, wins the lottery and gets a hold of this technology and figures it out, they basically win, right? Game over.
Yeah, but I don't think they're gonna.
They would still have to be able to replicate it and be able to field it like these entities can, and that in itself would be, are the rare earth minerals and whatever it's going to take to replicate in mass. Are they going to, would they even allow us to ramp up those capabilities? No. That's a whole different topic.
Are they going to allow us is the thing. Do they really want to let us have access to time travel or being able to warp between other parts of the galaxy, considering how warring our humanity and civilization is? I don't think so.
Well, it's hard to say because they may not care about any of that. We're small and we're feudal, and when we go out in space and decentralize, then we're going to be small and feudal out there. It's just the nature of what humans are. They're not humans. They could be a hive culture. They could be a combination of a hive and the AI. They could be a combination
of a hive with a consciousness that has its own level of intelligence on top of it. That's not AI, but it's a consciousness intelligence.
Right, they could have a super mind, right? There could be, they could be the forerunners of something else. They could be the worker class of something else entirely. We don't even understand why societies or civilizations decide to migrate into space to begin with. We know why we do it, but why might others do it? And these are a lot of questions that need to be engaged, as we try to divine, what their cultural imperative is, why they're in the motion to begin with, and why we're in this loop of their control, and what that means,
I found that interesting that we talked about remote viewing and the quantum entanglement of consciousness being the same parallel, or actually the same phenomena as quantum energy level. The energy of the universe is quantum entangled. It's one big giant field, but also in that collective consciousness of being quantum. He specifically said that it was quantum entanglement applications that allowed, somebody, for instance, he was saying about, picking up the phone knowing his daughter needed him to call her, and just being intuitive on that was a type of quantum entanglement to that collective consciousness, kind of like energy is quantum entangled to the electromagnetic field of the universe. So it's all one. It's a collective consciousness.
I'm not an expert on entanglement theory, but I do know that there are a lot of different applications at work right now using it, anything from quantum teleportation to quantum computing. And Dean Radin wrote a book in 2006. You know who Dean Radin is? R-A-D-I-N. He's psychic researcher for Institute of Noetic Sciences. And he's been an ESP researcher for years. If you Google him, Dean Radin, he wrote a book called Entangled Minds, and he offered a studied perspective on the relationship between entanglement and the kind of phenomena that ESP presents, and it was pretty compelling. There's more work to be done, obviously, but I think he's moving in the right direction.
Didn't Edgar Mitchell, wasn't he a part of that? One of the astronauts, wasn't he one of the founders of the Noetic science?
Yeah. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. So anyway, the whole RV thing is wrapped up in this. I think that's the other thing that I don't think, my little crowd on Friday is going to be ready for in the scope of all of the things that involve UFOs is this issue of nonverbal communication and the way that they're able to well, for example, I've had encounters with them where I didn't know I was going to be there 15 minutes before I got there, right? And they showed up. Okay, so how do they do that? Well, they're tracking you. Well, I don't have any recollection of anything, being embedded in me that makes me trackable. And remote viewing works by the dent you make in reality. You know what I mean? That's what entanglement does. So whether they enhance it with technology or not, I think that we seriously need to look at that and understand what they're doing and how they're able to do it in case there's some information about ESP related stuff. I talked to Hal Putoff and Russ Targ about this a couple of times over the years, and I haven't, not recently, it's been a long time, but they just never really wanted to go in that direction. But it was clear that there was a whole avenue of inquiry there that they just weren't going to talk to me about.
Yeah. The guest we had on last week, Don Dendary, he was talking about some other people he worked with that were able to develop hats and materials that they could put over people's heads that were, one was a ball cap, but different types of headgear that they could develop, and that people that were being abducted, they cut abductions down about, for those, some of them that wore it, they never cut, 40% of them had never been abducted again after using that device. Some had been intimidated to take it off and re-abducted, but almost in half the cases it stopped it because they weren't able to influence them to come out, come out of their homes or wherever they're at to get back into the craft and things to get in their head.
Yeah, that's because we do have an electromagnetic brain and everything else, and it basically, this is something that you're able to put on your head to go ahead and block their access to your thoughts.
A little Faraday cage for your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah, essentially that's what it was.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's what Hal and Dale were talking about. They said that they could kind of control or attenuate RV based on the environment that the subject was in. Underwater was better. Inside
that was the thing too. I just saw Hal Putoff, and it was Lou Elizondo and some other schmuck. They were all together in an office, and they were taking these metamaterials and this information, locking it up, and putting it inside this big, huge, like, safe of a file cabinet. I'm like, Hal, come on. You're the guy who knows remote viewing and all the things it can do. And you think that you putting that stuff and locking it up inside of a file cabinet is going to keep it safe?
It's bizarre. I talked to Hal about Phil Corso, and he told me that he had an original copy of Phil's manuscript, and that they actually lived, they were neighbors on this, they had summer houses, their families had summer houses on the same lake, and they were neighbors. And he had this had a copy of it all. I talked to him at length about it all. And so, like I said, the scope of the UFO thing has to go from lights in the sky to hot spots to CE 3, 4, and 5 type situations and scenarios to ESP, and all of it is going to involve technical analysis of technical capacities as well. So it's going to be a broad engagement, and I don't think the noobs understand that yet, no matter how good their PhD is, and I realize what we're doing is this is the point where anecdote becomes data, okay, and becomes evidence. This is the first level of evidence in an inquiry, all right, and it's a very formative moment for ufology and for the subject. It's very critical that this influences some people and moves them forward. So I'm not going to be talking too much about observations that we've made and field research and stuff, and I'm happy to share a bit of my own experiences, but in the context of why I'm here. I'm here because I can't sleep at night. I'm here because I have to do this because nobody else is.
You're here for the same reason that I am, Ted.
Yeah,
we're both dragged into this, whether we liked it or not. And it's something as adults we're dealing with, and we're doing what we need to do what is part of our part in bringing this awareness to civilization.
Not just awareness, we try and affect it to help protect civilization. Knowledge. Knowledge is power. So
Ted's prior stories are what frickin' opened my eyes to know this thing is not love and light. You cannot go ahead and transgress human emotions or human traits onto these entities because they're not human.
Yeah,
right. You can communicate with thought and emotion and deliver holographic images of different things to a degree of different stuff they've been involved in. So there is a method we can communicate with them. But how we see things and feel about it is completely a different paradigm than how they see it. And that's the biggest thing that everybody just needs to really sink into their heads and get in here is they are now the ones flying around in the helicopter and we are the rhinos they were shooting and tranquilizing. We're not in that position of thinking we're in the top spot and we can do anything to anything on this earth, and we're humanity, and they can't stop us. But now there's something that actually,
we're like Ted was saying earlier, we're occupied whether we want to acknowledge it or not. I have a problem with that.
Yeah, I do too. And the whole thing with how we work on this and how we move forward involves toning down our emotions. I know, for example, I'm sure listeners right now, sometimes we say things and it triggers them. Maybe they agree and they're nodding their head in a big way, or maybe they're disagreeing, going, no, that's way out there. I don't like the fear message and all the other stuff. And my point though is to set your emotions aside and learn to clearly look at what's going on in front of you and around you.
Stay in the center and look at what's around you. And then try and quantify it, but don't jump into any part of the pool. Stay where you're safe in the center and understand it.
And pay attention. And then the other thing is understand that nobody has a right to stand on a podium and tell 7 billion people that the kids are all right. Okay? Nobody has a right to stand up here and tell everybody that everything's okay here. And anybody that's doing that is dangerous. It's criminally negligent, in my opinion. And what's important here is that we look out for our own, we look out for our kids, we look out for our families, we pay attention to what's going on around us. We gather this information and compile it into something that we can use if we need to protect ourselves. I'll tell you one thing, friends and listeners, is that how it's been is not going to stay that way forever. It is the nature of the universe to change. And whatever this paradigm has been with these guys, it's going to change. And it could change in a not good way, and it could happen in the next 5 minutes.
Nature holds a vacuum. Power is always shifting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I thought there was going to be something big that was going to happen in July. And I was told, I'll say, well, it could maybe be in August. And I was told, no, it was going to be July. And I thought, oh, this is going to be something big like the aliens. No, it was my mom passing away. It's still
Well,
a big thing, but not for everybody.
it's a big thing. And the whole thing is that we aren't just people living in reaction to an alien presence. And that's the important thing to understand here, is that although we're very focused on this thing, we are living beings. And the most important thing that all of us need to do is live full and self-actualizing lives, and awaken our existence, view our work and our meditation, achieve our whatever level of mastery over ourselves and our minds that we can get to in our lives, and live good lives, so that we can't be oppressed by whatever this is about, and then lead and help this thing move forward.
Compartmentalize this as much as possible and still continue to try and live a normal life, but obviously not lose sight of it, but compartmentalize it where it doesn't bleed over into every other aspect of one's life.
That's right. Hug your kids, hug your wife, give your family a break at Thanksgiving and don't talk about it, all of those things, right? So that you're living, so that you're not just I have general anxiety disorder, right? I've been a nervous wreck for a long time, and that's part of the reason why I did a lot of meditative training and smoked a lot of joints and everything else I could do to offset anxiety. And I've got a pretty good handle on it now, but why live that way? Okay, I know there are crocodiles in the Nile. I don't have to go sit on the bank next to them and share my bologna sandwich with them. You know what I mean? And the same thing goes with aliens. We know that aliens are there. Let's get our best minds in gear, get your egos out of the way, and let the information move. Give up the idea that you're the one. Stop trying to be the one. Stop performing and being a hero on the podium, and start pushing the ball into new territory. Now's the time to start moving activism and advocacy to like we're doing with AIAA. There are a lot of other professional organizations that should be approached and briefed. Yeah. And people should be carrying the ball outward instead of turning inward and performing for ufology, turn outward. I mean, where are all these leaders, the Rich Dolans and the Nick Popes and everybody else? Where's the activism side? Challenge them. Yeah. They have all this knowledge. They've been up on the podiums. They've enjoyed the notoriety. Now help us make change and move in that direction.
Yeah. This is something that's really compelling me on this. So I want to ask you one more time. Have you heard much conversation in your circles of what their opinions are of why they're shadowing so many nuclear capabilities around the planet? Has there been much of a conversation in any of the circles that you're in is to speculate what they speculate the purpose of that might be?
It's interesting because there's a reason for it all, and I think generally what they're doing is they're maintaining a surveillance and watching upgrades, because system upgrades are constant, right? And weapon design changes constantly, weapon count changes constantly, right? Shuffling
capabilities.
So, exactly. So I think what they're trying to do is keep real-time documentation on WMD level. Weapon.
To what end is the big question.
Well, and I don't think they would do us any good in an engagement against them.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, to what end are they collecting this data? Are they going to save us from ourselves? And if they do, if they say, for example, if they did come out and say, okay, we're taking everyone's nukes away, it's necessary, or otherwise you're going to destroy the planet, are they going to leave an imbalance of power to where countries like Israel, their only way to exist without being destroyed is by the threat of nuclear force? Are they going to step in and be the world's police, like we did in Afghanistan? And Iraq, or they just take it away and let humanity, have it out, because that seems to be what they've done before. I don't
think either option is there. I think what it is that they keep track of these things, and because at some point when the other shoe drops with them, they want to be able to neutralize that capability for their own needs. They don't do anything for anybody but themselves.
No, that's what I'm saying. They want to keep the planet from being destroyed, so they would have to step in to humanity and say, "Okay, we're taking your toys away because you're gonna wreck our home too."
I think
and
they
not
would
care
only
what
do
effect it has on us.
that. I think they would only do that in an actual deployment.
Yeah,
They would do it at T-4 minutes and 30
exactly.
seconds.
And that's my thought.
You know?
But look how much China keeps ramping up their capabilities to dominate the planet. And a failing China is the one to worry about. And their economy is starting to turn around. Their global reputation and income is starting to digress a little bit. They're starting to falter. And if they thought that the United States were going to attain this type of technology, they may want to preempt before we were able to field it. If they thought we were going to, that in itself could even cause a war.
Well,
that thought.
it could. No, that's a perfectly legitimate scenario. And like I said, we have issues of materials engineering and all this other stuff to consider before we could replicate anything that little Great Brother has going on. But
yeah,
but I will tell you that the Chinese have had an ongoing interest in the subject and have a fairly mature view on it. They're probably as far along as we are, if not further. And they've been collecting data and working on this for a while. So this isn't something new to them. What we need a world summit on this so that we can establish that nobody can keep this data secret. So at least it's on writing. You know what I mean? Like we do with pandemics.
I think the Navy patents came out with the U.S. because China was getting close to producing the same thing. So we preemptively patented those technologies before they did. Because
but if you have one country that stands out and doesn't share their data on the pandemic, and that's a place where it started, it makes it hard to figure things out, doesn't it, Ted?
It does. But these are the issues we have as apes down here, dealing with our ape society and our ape culture and our ape hardwiring. We're not made to live in groups as big as we do. We're made to live in bands of
tribal
1 to 300. We're not.
But there's nothing wrong with being apes or monkeys or anything.
No, I don't mean that at all.
Part of our history of who we are. Wow, it even turns you into an ape.
All of our psychology, our intellect, everything we do arises from our hardwiring, and we're hardwired along a certain line on the tree of life, and we don't think like those, like little Great Brother, and we don't think like
motherfuckers.
Yeah. So. And that doesn't mean we're weak, and it doesn't mean that we can't do it, but we're a little behind the curve. If they've got millions of years of science and we've got about 600, we're
naive to think we could catch up and wage war against them, in the next 100 years or less.
Yeah, I have my doubts about that. That would take something.
We'll never catch up to them. They're too.
Yeah. Lou Elizondo came out and said that they know that this is down to, they think that they've mastered one specific type of physics that allows them to have all these capabilities that they observe. But even if we figure that out, we're still not going to be able to replicate it and know how to manifest it in mass and master it like they have. We're not going to catch up.
No. But
it disturbs me that they're not having a dialogue with us. So they just don't give a shit, basically, of how we feel or what we think. They don't care.
Well, they don't.
What it looks like.
And chances are that Avi Loeb, right? People talk about Oumuamua, right? Well, he's probably wrong about Oumuamua. But his big contribution was his paper on the estimated ambient temperature of the universe during its earliest epoch. And he estimated that the universe's temperature anywhere in space was 73 degrees Fahrenheit, which meant liquid water everywhere, which meant very early development to life, which meant rises of intelligences and civilizations, over the last 14 billion years, and waves upon waves. And then as the universe cooled, then these functions and existences started organizing around heat sources, stars and this kind of thing. So, and habitability zones and galactic habitability zones, solar system habitability zones, this kind of thing, because it's cold now. So Avi contributed this idea, and I think that it's entirely possible that a lot of the technology that an alien culture might have could have been derived from somebody else. It may not even be theirs to explain, but they know how to make it.
Just like similar to what happened with us, our initial technology is coming from somebody else.
Right, right. So, so again, we need advanced thinkers that can think about, the motivations and the things that would move an intelligence to take a strategigic posture in the galaxy, or whether they would. Whether is their presence here strategic, or is it happenstance, or is it why are they here? Are they not far away?
Or is this their planet, and we're just
I think it's a little of both.
Along for the ride besides us? It's more like a pest than it is, an equal.
Well, and even the bigger question of why they're in space. What pushed them out to begin with? Why did they go out, and why are we encountering them now? These cultural imperatives are really kind of critical for our own security and safety. And then beyond that, we can start looking at how the science developed and what they are, and maybe even come up with a strategy to try and communicate with them that is halfway effective. It just boils down to them wanting to, because I'm sure that they could do a television broadcast, they could do anything they want,
Yeah. They've noted they could communicate in any format they want, binary or anything else above, period. I mean, look at the Great Pyramid, how encoded it is with mathematics, their universal language.
Right. And there's been three major constructions on the Great Pyramid, where there was the initial construction, there was a remodeling and reconstruction of it during the initial Cyclopean megalithic stage, and then in the polygonal megalithic time frame. So there's a reason why we have these giant structures around the world. And maybe they'll come back to us, and who knows? We could be building pyramids again and try and stabilize the planet to keep shit from happening again. We don't know.
I don't know. I mean, giant stone edifices just don't seem like something an advanced alien tech civilization would care about.
But maybe if you needed to go ahead and balance off the planet, and for different parts that are offsetting a imbalance between the core and the surface, and to keep it so it's something that can continue to foster life. There's so many things we just don't know that could be out there. That
I think what we have to do is just stay grounded in our awareness and observation skills. Like I said, it's going to start with advocating for science to look at this, and we're doing that right now. And this won't be the only effort. I'm sure some other things are going to percolate up, not only here but around the world. And in other societies. You mentioned Sigma 2 before. Luke Dini runs that one. We were involved with them for a while. It was a good group. They're one of 10 working groups in the French aviation system, and they're absolutely 100% only dedicated to studying UAP. And they work with CNES GPAN. This French space agency has a UAP research team that's been active.
You also involved with the military and people from the Chilean government when they had that sighting? Was it in 2014 or 2015?
Yeah, we set up the first international research agreement with a government research team, I think, that's ever happened, and that was between NARCAP and CEPHA, Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena, and that's in their air technical school of their military facilities. We don't have a working agreement with them at this time. They've changed their command structure. So, this is another thing that people should be prepared to understand, is that when you get to a certain level of research and credibility, and you start having generals checking in your email and people like the AIAA contacting you and stuff, when you're functioning at that level, you start to understand what alliances are and which ones work and which ones don't. And we found ourselves, I'm very big on communication. So if we have a partnership with somebody, I'd like them to communicate with me before they make a public statement, because I'm a partner, right? Yeah. I should hear about it a little before they go public. It's not to tell them not to do it, but it's so that I know, right? And I found myself constantly behind the 8 ball and dealing with the Chileans. And the problem, as it turned out, was that they're not scientists.
Yeah.
It's a military group.
Yeah.
So it's run by a general, and a general doesn't have that objective and, you know, patience necessarily that a scientist is trained to cultivate.
Who knows what the U.S. government is feeding them on the sidelines as well.
Well, you know, and so anyway, we garnered this relationship, and since then it's lapsed. I had a lot of problems with trying to make it work, and anybody who's in an administrative role trying to reach across borders and work with this thing, there is a lot of issues with doing international partnerships, and there's a lot of issues just working with people here because of the covetousness and the proprietary nature of everybody and their desire to be the one over actually benefiting and serving humanity by moving the information.
Right. And you know, that's one thing I get. And there's just one thing that Rob has said earlier today that I've said in the past. Like, I've got a wrench army here on YouTube for the channel, and people who are going out and spreading our word and trying to get more people to come in and helping us connect with more people as time goes on. As you need to go ahead and expand that army of NARCAP again, as things are heating up and moving forward in a way that we haven't had this kind of impetus in the past. Feel free to call on either Rob or myself.
Well, I'm happy to do that. And if there's anybody in earshot that's interested or would like to talk to me, I try to be available to pretty much everybody. Our phone number is on the website. And, you know, I've got time for stories. I've got time for personal experiences, but I'm very much interested in pilots, and I'm very much interested in people who want to volunteer and do research, particularly if they're interested in putting their name on it. You know?
Yeah, I do extensive research. I'd be honored to help you with some of that if you'd like.
Yeah. Because I know it's good for you to go ahead at the right time and be able to bring Dr. Haynes in and get it there. But as we're transitioning to this new, you know, awareness and different things, if there's a way that NARCAP can take more of an active role and there's more people who can go ahead and help it get there, you know, we're all in.
Anybody in earshot, if you've got aviation experience or you think you've got something to contribute, you know, drop me a line, info@narcap.org, and we might have something for you to do. Or if you've got an idea that's aviation related, you know, just reach out. If you got a story, if you got, you know, if you were a flyer and you saw something, you know, or whatever, reach out.
Because I really value the conversation, the level of stuff you brought on, you know, just like when we had you on UFO Ma'am a while ago, there was a phenomenal response from the audience and from the panelists and stuff. And it's no different today, if not even stronger than it was at that point in time.
Well, it's good. This means that more people are paying attention, and you know, there's probably people out there with really, really good ideas, and they're just waiting for just a little extra push from somebody to step up. And hey, I'm here. Yeah, I'll push it.
Because you've got this going as well, but then you've got another initiative for getting papers about UAPs and everything peer reviewed as well, don't you?
I actually set up a journal. It's a multidisciplinary peer-reviewed journal with following standards of research and publishing, commonly used ones used by the AAAS, the American Institute of Advancement of Science, American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. But yeah, I've set that up, and I can help referee papers as well. If a person's never written a paper before, that don't be bashful. It's not rocket science.
But it's as far as getting the word out there and getting stuff out there and be able to bring that together as well. And that's the beauty of this, is we can try and, you know, get the information out there, because even Linda Thompson keeps on saying yes what we're saying. She's, you know, so deep into research on ufology and different things that are out there. You know, it's just
she wrote a really nice. She wrote a really nice paper on that crash in Missouri, the 1941 crash in Missouri that didn't happen. There was some good scholarship there. Good job, Linda. And hello, Julie Farrell, if you're out there. And of course, I talked to Robert. Hi, Robert. You know, and just, but yeah, this is it's a key time, and if you've got ideas, there's a way to present them cogently, and you shouldn't be fearful of putting it in writing. And if I can help in any way to prepare a paper, I'm happy to do that. If you go to our website, I've either published or helped publish about 50 technical or related papers that were fairly serious on the subject, and they're authors of all kinds from everywhere.
Yeah.
And we've done that.
At the top of the chat, I do have a link to Ted's website, narcap.org. Just really easy. You just go ahead and click it. It'll open up another window for you and such.
Yeah, just go up in the nav bar and check out research, or go to the blog. There's good stuff there. I've had I've had 140 countries in my website in the last 6 months, and my web traffic has just gone through the roof. I've never seen so many people on my website.
Yeah.
And just crazy patterns and all of that too. So
yeah. Didn't you write also an in-depth paper on the flight characteristics of UAP?
Yeah, it was a preliminary examination of the flight dynamics of 4 commonly reported UAP by profile, and that worked out pretty well. I've had a lot of attention to that and to my pilot advisory and to that our technical report 20, that case analysis I did of that cargo hauler over Mexico. Pretty good case.
Have you had any cases where they verified that UAP caused the crash?
No. We've had allegations. The low survivability of the air crew
I heard you say it before, I think.
Sorry, and the intermittent radar detection for UAP makes it questionable, and whether or not it actually hit the plane. If the pilots felt there was a hazard and did a control input that didn't end well,
if they don't survive, they can't attest to what crashed them.
I have a quick question that finally came in from the audience. Thank you to Beverly Holmes for asking the question. Ted, what year did the first international research agreement between NARCAP and the SIPA begin or end?
SIPA. I'm not sure who that is, Beverly. Our agreement with Chile started in 2010, and then we worked with PNEF informally throughout. We actually briefed them at one of their conferences in 2014, and then we spoke to the French Air and Space Academy as well at that time. But I'm not sure who. Hopefully that's who she's talking about as SEPA. I don't know who
probably
that is.
Instead of SIPA, it's SEPA. Same, yeah.
Yeah. She might have misunderstood me. It's okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Beverly. It's 2010.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah, and that's what it all comes down to, I guess, is collaboration on many fronts.
That's right.
And communication,
sharing. People should be picking up the phone and calling me if they're stimulated, and they got something to say. The information needs to network and move. We need to have a buzz, right? And it needs to be material. It needs to be above agendas. It should be about carrying the ball into new territory, not making somebody into a hero.
Yeah.
For the collective good, not the personal notoriety.
That's right.
It was one of the questions I posed you. I'm sure I stumped you on. Was that one of the things? It's like, okay, when I have the memories and I'm looking back at the different memories of what was going on, I had this light craft that was up there and it was causing light where light could be seen or not, but it wasn't causing long shadows. Could that be based on the type of light it was, or it could be something where the surrounding area could actually be part of that overall time warp bubble that's around the craft?
Well, it could be like you could be inside of something, its range of influence, or there could be a wide boundary area. You know what I mean? The extent kind of far beyond it, and so you experience other effects in the process. The strongest effects are close. I was within 15 feet of one at one point, and we ended up 3 hours ahead.
Yeah.
In about a minute and a half.
Yeah. At least you think it was a minute and a half.
Well, yeah. I mean, what is time? Okay, when it comes right down to it, but we went from afternoon to well after dark in a very short amount of time. It was very disorienting. But if we'd have been further back from this thing, it might not have been so extreme, and there might have been other things, And I don't know how these emanations affect brain activity either. So that's a whole other question.
Yeah, especially when they're already doing stuff to the prefrontal cortex. I know after this thing happened, I was initially, if you want to call it, pointed out by the doctors, like, wow, you're autoimmune. That was fast. He's like, he didn't see it before. And all of a sudden I went in there to see him, and he grabbed my fingernails and looked, and there was just the signs that were there. And it went on for 3 years where it just got worse and worse and worse. And then all of a sudden it just stopped.
Huh. Did you ever get checked for radiation poisoning?
Probably not.
Huh.
But there was something going on at that time that just had taken my entire lower abdomen thing and just dealt with stuff. It got so bad, it was almost like the kind of issues that some people with lupus have. But I was a young, probably 8-year-old boy, which threw everybody off because it didn't make sense.
Right. It was anomalous.
I wonder if that would still be something found in the isotopes in his bones if he had radiation poisoning.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I was thinking. You get outside of the Earth's atmosphere, when fielding could be there or could fail, or there could be different types of exposures. Or the device itself, like the Michelin case in Canada, where the guy had the grid burned onto his stomach from too close to it. That things like that, where people end up, or pull that the Cash Lundgren case. Where the ladies died from radiation poisoning, exposure to whatever the hell that was. I don't know what that was.
We've got another question here from Beverly. She wants another good question. I kind of know where this may go, but has NARCAP considered teaming up with SCU?
Yeah, we did. So good question, Bev. And yeah, I was invited on board in May of this year. And we haven't formally formalized it, but yes, I deal with with SCU, and we are partners. I haven't sent them back their partnership form, but who's using snail mail? But yeah. But Robert Powell, I've known him for a long time. He's a good guy. I've known Rich and some of the other principals in this project for at least probably a decade anyway. So good question, Beverly. And yes, I partner with SCU. But that having been said, there's things that I agree with, things I don't. Right? I'm not. It isn't an endorsement necessarily of SCU or anything they're doing.
No.
But I think it's good for them and good for us to be associated.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of things. You go ahead and take a look at it, and tap your toe in the water and see what's happening around, and proceed with caution. Make sure there's no sharks around.
Well, exactly, and that's the one thing I've learned in this field is that there are sharks, and they're right there on your Facebook page.
Or following your Twitter account.
Yep.
Yeah. We've got an answer question for you. Had you ever heard of the private plane that arrived from Nassau to Florida like 3 hours ahead of time that he said entered a type of a energy vortex that he got back from Nassau to Florida to the airport in Miami, I think it was, in way under the time frame that was allotted for that, where he said he flew in some strange clouds and it seemed to pull him through an energy vortex where he was...
No, that one's news to me, but having had temporal effects in the close proximity of these things, it wouldn't surprise me that maybe an aircraft would too. I don't know how to take that. It's a story at this point, but
I can understand the physics of it. I just heard of it. It's kind of like a railgun type scenario of sorts, like an electromagnetic field that would propel him through it, like a railgun would.
Yeah,
I didn't know if you'd heard of it.
No, that to me would make a lot of sense as far as getting somebody well ahead of time. Usually it's they get a tailwind, right? Something makes it work for them to do that, but to be propelled like a projectile in a railgun, I don't know. The world,
it's just wild speculation, but
I'm the last person to say that things don't happen. I just, I keep my focus kind of centered. Now, if you know who the pilot is and he wants to talk to me, I'd be happy to talk.
I didn't know if that were one of the cases that came across your desk, is why I asked.
No, I haven't seen that one. But temporal effects are a whole area that need to be looked at with this too, because it's a clue to how these things relate to our environment. It's already clear that they don't experience resistance to changes in direction or velocity. So they can come to a dead stop in midair. Nothing comes to a dead stop in midair except some fly, you know.
Yeah, they're not in the air. They've got their own local gravity and gravitational mass.
They're
There's
decoupled from
fluidity. There's no resistance.
I watched a cylinder with a crew that the side facing me was transparent. Okay. And the crew was, and they were about a mile away. And so all they could see, you know, and it was real, they'd come to a dead stop and we were doing 55 moving towards them. We were just a little over a mile away. I know because I measured it in Google Earth, but we were looking right at it and I didn't blink and I thought I was seeing silhouettes and none of it made sense. I grew up in an aviation household. I didn't know what I was looking at. And then it just jumped and it moved so fast that it stopped twice, but it was like start, stop, start, stop. It was like if you've ever seen like a cat move so fast you couldn't see the movement, you know.
It's like something moving a strobe light.
Right. It was like that.
And the next strobe, it's like a foot ahead.
Right. And the cause of the strobe was my brain processing the visual image, right? It was moving faster than I could gather it. So it was stopping and then gathering more. So I guess that's what happened. But anyway, this thing jumped and came to a dead stop less than its own length from my windshield. And in it it had a deck. It was divided in half. And there was a deck with a void under it. And it was transparent from top to bottom and end to end, but not front to back. Or not on the back side of it. You couldn't see through it, but you could see the whole inner half workings of this thing. And you could see the crew and their activity. And the whole thing was standing on two really big white lights. Okay. Now, when it made that movement and it came to a dead stop right in front of my car, you know, when you're riding on a bus, right, and the bus is doing 5 miles an hour and the guy hits the brakes, what happens? You fall on your face, right? Yeah. Because you resist the change in velocity, right? That the physics of your environment resists the change in velocity. Now, when they did that movement, they didn't even rock on their heel, and it should have killed them. And I think it was probably quite leisurely from their perspective.
Yeah, but you got to remember, whatever's inside of that field feels no effects of the outside movement of it. So as far as they're considered, as they're moving along all these things, they're just in there stationary.
Well, and I understand that. That's the point I'm making for your listeners is that these things don't experience inertia the way airplanes do, or rocks or flying squirrels do. So they're capable of doing angular turns. Well, an airplane can't do an angular turn. It has to change heading. It has to fly around a curve, right? It's the nature of flight to do that. And so moving angularly, nothing moves angularly. You can't shoot an arrow and make it do a 90-degree turn in midair. Okay, so everything about this physics should be tantalizing to people who are interested in it. Particularly,
it got me brought into this in the first place. But then the national security implications, when I found out how often they were frequenting our military around the world, then my shift moved from the physics intrigue to the security implications, and that kind of took a wayside.
And like I said, we can't be whistling past the graveyard here. We can't have sacred cows. If Travis Walton didn't happen, then it didn't happen. I don't care. Something happened today. You know what I mean? I don't care about Travis Walton. I don't care about Roswell. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is what we can learn today about what we have in front of us. And we can't afford sacred cows. So if something gets debunked, or if there's a really good argument why it shouldn't be taken as bona fide God's truth that it's UAP related, then adapt and move on. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it. Don't feel like you have to die on some hill protecting Travis Walton. Everybody, oh, he's such a nice guy. Well, you know what?
Yeah, this isn't religion. We don't have to worry about protecting old things that may or may not be correct.
Every con man out there is a nice guy. Everybody who was ever conned by anybody says, he was such a nice guy. You know what I mean? So just let go of your sacred cows. Let go of your beliefs around all of this so you don't experience cognitive dissonance. That's what happens. You believe what's going on, then you get new information and you can't cope. So you get angry.
We can't afford to be individuals when the entire human civilization is at risk potentially.
We got to get it together. We got to get bigger than all of that. And like I said, do the work, write the papers. If you got something in writing and there's a multidisciplinary journal that wants your paper, Linda, send it to me. You know, I'm here for everybody. I want good things to happen out of all this, and it's the only right direction to go in.
I had a very interesting thing happen about 3 years ago. Since Fukushima, I've got a radiation detector. It takes, well, you know what they are. It goes down in the millirods, Israeli model. I forgot I even had it in my room, but it was plugged in. I had batteries still in it. But one day it just started going off at random, I thought, but it was a real heavy rainstorm. I went outside and used it on the puddles of water, and I was getting 2-3 millirods out of each puddle and things. The storm had came in from the Pacific Ocean and was raining down radioactive rainfall from the Pacific Ocean because of the Fukushima radiation. It was actually burning my skin to be out in it. It was the damnedest thing.
For your listeners, 2 or 3 millirods isn't really the end of the world. Okay,
No.
but it's present and
it's higher than background radiation.
Right. The background radiation at the site that I've been working out in the desert's 55 millirods.
Yeah.
And there's a strong barium presence in the place, and so I'm wondering, and uranium too. So I'm wondering if there's like some radon or something leaking up through the ground base, because it's actually an old dried up riverbed. So, you know, but yeah, these are all important things. Start learning how to understand your environment, learn how to test it, learn. You know, you don't have to wait. You know, you can, on your iPhone, for Pete's sake, you can get a whole suite of testing devices, including Geiger counters and all kinds of crap, and it's on your phone. Yeah, and it's on your phone. You know, so people can start paying attention to what's going on around them and using it. But
there's ways to see if there's anything. It doesn't cost a lot of money, like you're saying, to be able to monitor your environment. I had some people that were having issues with feeling unwell in their environment and stuff. I had them get an infrasonic app and put it on their phone, and there were local machinery putting out infrasonic sound waves that were making them sick. So, you know, they figured that out, but they would never figured it out. But you know, we did it we took the steps to look at it, you know, look at the facts and figure out what the variables could be, and then start diagnosing, you know, with a scientific thought process.
Right. That's rational, you know, and it works, and you can learn. You know, the thing is, we've got a lot of stuff out there, like, for example, Skinwalker. When you look at Skinwalker, it's outlier data. There's nothing in the Skinwalker narrative that overlaps with the UFO narrative, really. You know what I'm saying? It's lights, it's stuff we get light, but a Skinwalker is a native witch who can take on the shape and form of an animal whose skin it's wearing.
Yeah,
that's all. That's what it is. That's what a Skinwalker is. And so to present it as anything other than that isn't realistic. And you get a lot of this. It's sensationalism. But there's a stronger argument that there was something going on at Skinwalker that was a little bit darker and a little more nefarious. And so we have these different clans and factions. You know, and I've always thought, well, you know, if Bigelow had found anything that he could use, he would have employed it in his space program, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so on. So I've always wondered why the story kept going, but nothing really came out of the story, you know, and yet there's these. So there's some argument about whether or not there was like, psychotronic weapons testing or something like that going on out
deep underground facilities that may have been under. But they also said that that there was a ancient impact site where it compressed the bedrock into a natural parabolic shape that was unique for being able to maybe reflect out solar rays or act as an antenna to either broadcast or receive either one.
Well, if you look at the release of liability that they had for people that were working the ranch, it doesn't talk very much about UFOs. Talks a lot about psychological damage from and types of psychological reactions to things. So my point is, I don't know whether Skinwalker's true or not. I've had my opinions about Bigelow over the years. I don't know if he's somebody to be trusted or not. I've avoided him myself.
Yeah.
You know, but this again, you get invested in these things, these ideas. You want to chase these things around. Focus on what's real. Focus on the real.
Yeah, it's the exception, not the rule. And if we want to help humanity, we got to focus on the rule. You know, what's the majority of what we're dealing with, not an anomaly in one place. I mean, it's novel, it's interesting, but it's not advancing the football to the end of the goal line.
Well said. I agree 100%. Exactly. So how are we doing, Tom?
Oh, we're doing good. I mean, the conversation has gone a heck of a lot longer than I, had looked at it for, but it's been a great conversation. So I've just been kind of listening and just being amazed by all the stuff that you say in a regular time frame, Ted. If this is a point where you need to go, I completely understand.
I could step out here, but I don't have to, and it's really about your listeners and you, and if we've got anything else, any other problems of the world we need to solve here with our collective.
I'd like to ask you about the reports you got on your website about the balls of light, the energy balls that may not be craft.
Yeah,
I've kind of done some research on that as well with the Foo Fighters and things.
Mm-hmm.
Where they've had impacts on bedrock with the earthquake manifestations that create balls of light. I was wondering the way the Foo Fighters came up from the ground and followed the bombers and things around, but they never did interfere with them, and they seemed like they were gravitationally bound the way they interacted.
Wait a minute, did you say UFOs are following the Obamas? It's like the energy, the plasma balls were magnetically charged in following the craft because of the magnetism, and it seemed like they were following magnetic lines.
I didn't get a lot of details about these cases other than lights sighted in bomber formations. The original Foo Fighters were, I believe, it was a Japanese night, or it was what do they call? They were night fighters, Black Widows, they called them, and they were radar enhanced night fighters, and they were picking up targets that they couldn't see, and so they called those Foo Fighters. This was off of Okinawa and in the Pacific, so they were actually getting radar targets. Of course, this is primitive radar back then. It could have been spurious. But they were pretty adamant that they were getting solid returns. And then we had the other side of it where we had bomber crews over Germany that were recording them from time to time, and they were reported by all players. The Japanese saw them, the Germans saw them, and Italians saw them. We did.
This may sound way out there, but if it comes relevant at any point with anybody you're talking about, I had to wonder, like with the lights that they found out were from the compression of the quartz in the bedrock from the earthquake that caused the lights, the orbs in those instances, and the ones where they had repetitive lights over certain places out west that they figured out were these orbs. I mean, I know they're the exception, not the rule, but I had to wonder because the orbs started showing up toward the end of World War II. They were dropping so much ordnance on Germany. I had to wonder if they were compressing the bedrock so much that they were creating orbs coming out of there like they would replicate from an earthquake to create orbs that made the Foo Fighters could have been orbs of energy coming up from the ground because of the compression. I've never heard anybody else speak of it, but if it ever comes up in conversation someplace, you might kick it forward for me.
But it's a creative question, and I don't know that it's necessarily irrelevant either. There are some thoughts about these ball of light phenomena around aircraft being related to the aircraft and its presence in the environment. That somehow there's a.
It seemed like it was.
I personally I don't subscribe to that because I've been kind of close to these things too, and they it's almost like it's a camera, right?
Yeah, it's kind of what it seemed like.
Camera, and it comes right up to you.
They're observing.
Yeah, it's got behaviors, you know, it moves around, it encounters things. It's like it's watching stuff. And it's like a quantum camera or something. There's some little kid operating it on, you know, Enceladus or something there, you know, studying the, you know, but like, that's what I feel about those things. I don't know, but I wonder. I do know that natural phenomena account for, you know, and misidentifications of human activity account for a lot of cases. And I think a lot of cases would go away if the truth were told, that, you know, they'd be mundane if they were finally resolved. But some are not. And the problem with the balls of light is the duration.
Yeah. Yeah. The naturals don't last long.
Yeah. And when it was compressing force under heavy presses, right, to show that it created those light, that generated light, it was for fractions of a second, you know?
Yeah.
So it would be short duration. Oftentimes it's like in Italy, they reported a glow. They had an earthquake and they got a glow coming off of the fault zone where it was at. And then they got a couple of individuated balls of light, but they were short duration. And they just kind of, they're almost like a ball lightning. Ball lightning is only 5 or 6 seconds of duration. They don't last long. So anything that has a long duration, it needs a supporting energy source of some kind. It needs to be drawing energy in some way, you know, to keep itself, to remain coherent. That case over Mexico that I did a while back involved an a freight hauler out of Corentero Airport heading north to Memphis, being paced for 32 minutes by a substantial ball of light, pretty good size one. And according to the guy, he was a C-135 tanker operator, and he'd been flying cargo for another 10 years. So he had most of 20 years night flight experience, and he felt that it was less than 2,000 feet from his plane. And it was pacing him. So it came from above, it dropped down, and then matched the pace of the aircraft at a little over 500 miles an hour at 38,000 feet. And then before they got to the border, it veered away. Before they hit the U.S. border, it veered west.
Yeah,
they
that's
lost
not
it on chart. So, well, you know, I don't know. You know, Mick West could have gone to something when he suggested that it was Venus, but the problem is that the plane was flying northbound, and the whole northern northwest sky was visible to these guys, and they weren't going north; they were going northeast. So, if Venus was setting in the west, the plane would have been further to the left of the pilot and so on. And when you're evaluating cases, you have to evaluate everything, the crew, you know, what they have to say about it, how it manifested, along with what they captured on the camera. You can't just say, well, that's a bokeh because it's out of focus, because the camera's auto focusing, and then and just ignore the testimony of the pilots. Both of them.
Would there have been a high charge for the northern lights from a CME at the time or something that may have hypercharged the upper atmosphere?
He said it was a teardrop shaped ball of light that was pacing his aircraft, and it stayed with him for 32 minutes. So that's a long lived phenomenon, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
For plasma to continue, the reaction has to be maintained. And whether it's RF frequency, you know, or radio frequency, or whether it's charged magnetic field, or whether it's by impact,
I just don't see that it would be, if any type of natural phenomena, electrostatic charge wouldn't have that kind of properties that I'm aware of. But like we said, like you were saying in one of your interviews, they also doubted that sprites existed too at one point.
Yeah.
Right. But then they found out that those were actually a phenomena that are true.
Well, this is when you want to evaluate the credibility of pilots on UFOs. That's the model I use, and I say, look, for decades the pilots were reporting lightning leaving the tops of clouds and going into space. Bryant said, no, that's not possible. It doesn't happen. And but a couple of atmospheric physicists kind of kept the anecdotes, collected a few of them, and by 1989 they discovered that pilots were right, that they'd been right all along, and that science had been dismissing it out of hand. And of course, my argument is, well, what else are pilots telling you about? You know, that being dismissed out of hand.
Yeah.
So all of that it's all about how things move forward. Science comes last usually. It's the experience, the observation, it's the wonder, it's the flipping out, and then it's and then science comes along and explains it.
Yeah. I got a quick question here from the audience, from Sneaky Toaster. Do you have any thoughts on the Sky Hub initiative?
Oh, I think it's a good idea. I think states, you know, having sensing equipment that'll detect them and accumulating data, I think it's a great idea. And I think Chris is well qualified to do the job. And I look forward to seeing some kind of results out of it. It's too bad that it's kind of limited in the types of sensing and everything. But you know, you got to start somewhere. And you know, like I said, I've got hot spots that I can't get people to come to. You know, that need to be staked out. You need to be there for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Sitting and staring at nothing and then getting the crap scared out of us. And
yeah. I got someone doing that in Vegas already. And the work that he's been putting off is just amazing. So if there's a way to connect with you on that kind of thing, there's just another hot spot where there's already someone sitting out there every night watching for stuff, recording it and sharing it.
Well, and the other side of it, though, is you can't just put up a YouTube video and yell UFO. You need to write a paper. You need to write a paper, and that's his problem.
Yes, that's the problem. You got someone who likes watching videos and getting that together, but actually writing the paper is the other part. So I guess it's teaming up someone who's a writer and researcher to go along with the particular data that's being put together.
You know, I'm happy to step up. Okay, but he's got to do it. It's going to have his name on it. It's his research. Yeah. I'm not putting my name on it. He's got to make his case, you know. But I'm happy to referee it so that it's written in a way that a scientist would want to read it, and that it contains information that they need to evaluate it. I'm happy to do it. Yeah. And if he wants to, you know, if he wants to get like a half a dozen of his best case examples and show us why that they're the real deal and help us get it in writing, then I'm happy to do that.
I've got another one here from Excalperful. He or she just subscribed to the channel. Can you ask Ted if you've heard anything about orbs that watch people sleep or induce video in the mind?
Well, I don't know about the second part, but I have heard my ex, her and her mother had one in their room. When she was a child. It was late at night and it came out of their closet. It was a small blue softball-sized ball of light, as they described it. I didn't see it, but so yeah, I've heard about them being inside of people's homes. It wasn't ball lightning. Again, that's short duration. It's explosive. It's highly energetic.
I haven't heard about ETs coming out of the closet, but then you never know. They are a bunch of three little guys flying around in an airplane, you know, and a UFO by themselves.
You know what? I don't judge, right? But one thing I do is I protect witnesses. When a young lady came to me a while back, she had been tying herself to her husband at night, and they set up a camera one night and they caught it when she left, and it was pretty remarkable bit of video. And then when she was returned. And there was this whole thing about grabbing a hold of it and working on it. And I got to her and I told her, I said, you and your new family with your new husband are not ready for what you're about to pull down on top of yourselves. You know, I'll keep her in mind if I'm in a rarefied environment where somebody would really be interested in knowing that could make a difference, you know, but she shouldn't go through the kind of crap people go through when they go public with this stuff. Whitley Stryber was in the middle of it, and I asked Whitley, I said, so what kind of team are you putting together to work on this? And that was the last I heard from Whitley. And then, you know, and I basically just kind of circled her and protected her a bit to keep until she could decide whether or not she wanted the notoriety that was about to come her way. And she decided not to. It was a good call. Look out for each other. You know, that ufology isn't good for most everybody. Those of us who've had experiences and all, I can't say that getting involved in ufology was a good thing for me to do. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. I thought I was doing exactly the right thing. I thought I was
initiation of the fire that you went through, you know, nobody should have to experience that. And I think, you know, that's what is admirable that compels you to be involved in this is, you know, knowing how traumatic this is for what you experienced, but yet you still put yourself out there to help try and solve the problem, when, you know, no one would blame you to not be involved in something of this nature that triggers, you know, your emotions and PTSD and things. You know, that's a highly admirable quest that you've taken up.
Well, thanks, Robert.
Not for yourself, but for everybody that's that's experienced what you have. That.
Well, I appreciate that, Robert. I want to kind of since we're all just running off the mouth here, I want to talk a little bit about what happened after I had that experience in Oakland in 1999. I was very sick. I kept thinking I was having psychic episodes, and occasionally I was, or I was very convinced that I was. Let's just say it that way. And other things were kind of going on around me. I felt really deluded. I felt like I had been chosen, or I was part of something, and that there was something grander going on, and somehow I was in the middle of that, which is the very opposite of my life, where I didn't mean anything to anybody. I had a lousy upbringing and not a lot of confidence. I just kind of made my way in life and wasn't very good at it, but I was making it and not going to jail or anything. I just wasn't, I didn't get a good start, and I didn't fly well in my 20s and 30s.
You coped well under the circumstances, believe me, because most people, they grow up like what sounds like you and I did both. The girls go to counseling, the boys go to jail, and eventually they both the majority end up dead because they can't overcome the trauma.
So my point is that I was really sick after this incident happened, and I felt unwell and unbalanced, and I'm constantly looking up, hypervigilant. I already had anxiety, and I had previous experience. It wasn't my first rodeo, but it was the most direct one I'd had in a while. I mean, I got to see their faces, and I was very, very disturbed. So a couple of months into that, I got to thinking, maybe somebody down at Ames Research Center knows something. I wrote a little note to NASA Ames PR office, their public relations area. And within just a few hours, Dr. Haynes got back to me. And then began this odyssey, first investigating us, and then I got involved with setting up this team and then running it. But my caution for all of your listeners and anybody that gets one of these experiences, particularly if it's dynamic experience with a lot of detail and a lot of very close interaction or encounter, nobody on that team, Dr. Haynes, Dr. Valee, Dr. Heisch, none of the 50 other members of NARCAP gave two cents about me and my mental health. And I continued to decline as I was working, as the executive director, answering emails at 3 a.m. on Christmas, just never ending, constantly on this thing, never off, because I can be on because I'm that strong, right? And which isn't true. And I kept going with it and going with it. I lost my girl, I lost my jobs, I lost all kinds of stuff. But I knew I was right. I knew that it was real. I stuck with NARCAP. At one point, I was homeless for about 5 years, and I lived under a tree, and I NARCAP with a laptop. And as the executive director, I had all responsibility other than research, and I kept it. Ran a team of 50, living under a tree.
That's just unreal. You
practicing
meditation, amazing.
Training like a maniac. Okay, I had my swords. I taught myself the entire, all of the sets of the Muso Shinrin-ryu, and then I got invited by monks at the local temple there in Kona to come and do a sort of a mondo, a test, and then teach there. And so I teach sword to people, usually singular clients from around the world, but all of that came from dealing with this, teaching free diving, breath hold diving, living on the beach basically, and giving up on life as far as a normal life, and only being compulsively fixated on doing this work with the UFO thing. And that's what got me.
Normal is subjective. Yeah, it may not be normal for what most people in society would consider a normal life, but you're the culmination of all your life experiences. I'd say it's pretty normal for what you're experiencing and have experienced. It may not be normal for most other people on the planet, but I understand it.
Thanks for saying that, Robert. And I want your listeners to understand that, is that, we're at this point because a lot of us have really suffered. Look at Stan Friedman. Okay, he busted his hump until he died. He died in an airport coming back from a conference. You might agree or disagree with Stan, but he was here trying to make a point that there is an occupation, and there's a lot of them. Dr. Haynes stepped down in 2015. Frankly, he should be the one presenting to the AIAA right now.
But the thing is, you're here to carry the torch and everything.
That's right.
Get us there and everything. And not meaning to go ahead and kind of cut this thing short, but I have other family things and other stuff that I have to attend to.
Most certainly, Tom.
Yeah.
Most certainly.
And it's been a pleasure to have you here, Ted. It's been phenomenal. I hate to end this now, but it's just stuff I've got going on in my life that I need to go ahead and spend some time with. And I really appreciate you and Rob and Greg and the whole audience coming out here tonight. It's been something very special to me.
Hey, give me a call if you need to talk to somebody. I know what you're up against, and blessings on you and your family and on her. And I nothing but good things for you guys. And thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, but hang on for 1 second here. Let's just say goodnight to the audience and everybody, and I'll let the guests, the presenters, go ahead and talk. And good night, everybody. Thanks. Have a great evening. We will catch you on the flip side. Thanks for coming out, Linda, Scratch, Ack, Banana Booey, Bob Gray, everybody. It's been great having you here.
This conversation, give me a ring. I can shoot you.
No, we're not done yet. Hold on.